Warrior Lore. Chapter 28. When Gu Fei saw the black and white ball of light that entered through the door, all the hair on his body stood up, and a chill ran down his spine. The familiar fluctuations were caused by the interaction of the yin and yang forces of heaven and earth. Vaguely, one could see that within the black and white light, there was a jade pendant. Gu Fei was inexplicably shocked, and fear rose in his heart. He saw the black and white ball of air turn in the air, and as if it had a mind of its own, it flew straight towards Gu Fei. Gu Fei was shocked and reached out to block, but the ball of light suddenly accelerated and in an instant bypassed his palm and entered his chest. Gu Fei only felt a chill in his chest, as if he had been hit by a large snowflake. He hurriedly looked down and saw a ray of black and white light flash in front of his chest, and then he saw a yin-yang symbol, the size of an egg, appear in the middle of his chest. Unbelievable, really unbelievable. The yin-yang jade pendant actually came back on its own. Could it really have developed a spiritual consciousness? Thinking of the earth-shattering scene last night, Gu Fei found it difficult to calm down. This yin-yang jade pendant was too mysterious, and it had an unfathomable power. Even the protective mountain formation of the Supreme Mystery Sect was broken. Moreover, since this yin-yang jade pendant had already flown away, why would it come back? This made Gu Fei unable to understand, no matter how hard he thought about it. "Senior Gu, are you there?" Just as Gu Fei was standing there stupidly, at a loss of what to do, there was suddenly a call from outside the cave. "Is it Junior Zhao? What is she doing here?" Gu Fei was startled, and immediately shook his head, temporarily putting aside the chaotic thoughts in his mind, then tidied up his clothes and walked towards the cave door. In the light rumbling sound, the heavy stone door opened. Outside the room stood a slightly nervous and worried girl in white. When the white-clothed girl saw Gu Fei walk out from behind the stone door, the worry on her face immediately disappeared. A faint smile appeared on her otherworldly and flawless face. "Senior Gu, what happened just now? I heard movement inside, and then I saw a strange glowing thing," Zhao Ziru hurriedly asked. Hearing this, Gu Fei was startled, and said with a bitter smile, "I was cultivating just now, and that sound was produced when I was cultivating. As for the strange thing you were talking about, I did not see it." Gu Fei directly concealed the matter of the yin-yang jade pendant. He did not want anyone to know that he had such a jade pendant, because this yin-yang jade pendant was too strange. It was too unbelievable, and it would bring him great trouble. "Is that so? I clearly saw." Zhao Ziru was skeptical and wanted to say more. However, Gu Fei interrupted her with a wave of his hand, not allowing her to continue. "Junior Sister Zhao, why have you come to my place so early in the morning?" Gu Fei asked. Gu Fei knew that he wasn't very popular in the sect, and no one could get along well with him. Normally, no one would come to the Green Spirit Peak. "Last night, I didn't see Senior Brother in front of the main hall, so?" Hearing Gu Fei ask her why she came here, Zhao Ziru could not help but be stunned. Then, she blushed and said softly, "Gu Fei had been brought back to the Supreme Profound Sect by Wan Xianqing since he was young, and was accepted as a disciple. He was also the only disciple, and he had never come into contact with a girl before. Moreover, he had focused all his attention on cultivation, so of course, he did not know what the girl was thinking. I'm fine. If there's nothing else, Junior Sister, please go back," Gu Fei said indifferently. Right now, he was having a headache because of the yin-yang jade pendant. At this time, he did not have the mood to greet Zhao Ziru. A trace of disappointment flashed on Zhao Ziru's face while she bit her lower lip lightly. It was unknown if there was pity or tenderness in her eyes as she gazed at Gu Fei, but she sighed and said, "All right then, Senior Brother, take care." As she spoke, Zhao Ziru turned around and walked down the mountain. Why did she? When Gu Fei saw Zhao Ziru's strange expression, he could not help but feel a little strange. He vaguely felt that something in his heart had been touched. Why do I have this feeling? Gu Fei did not understand. He watched Zhao Ziru's graceful and slender figure disappear from the mountain path, then turned around and walked into the cave. The heavy stone door slowly closed with a light rumble. just as the yin-yang jade pendant returned to Gu Fei's body. Supreme Mystery Sect, Supreme Mystery Temple, Back Hall, that was the cultivation place of the sect leader, Taoist Xintian. At this time, in the back hall, on the 8 praying mats on the ground, sat 8 purple-robed old Taoists. On one of the praying mats in the middle, sat the sect leader of the Supreme Mystery Sect, Taoist Xintian. In front of Taoist Xintian was an ancient magical tool. It was an ancient mirror with ancient patterns engraved on the back, but the front was like a bronze mirror. This ancient mirror didn't seem to have anything special about it. It was very ordinary and unremarkable. The smooth side was difficult to even reflect on, and one could only see a blurry shadow. However, this seemingly ordinary mirror had displayed great power last night. Taoist Xintian had almost used this treasure of the Supreme Mystery Sect to kill the demon lord of 6 paths, who had dominated the Tanglong continent for hundreds of years, and no one had been able to stop him. Senior, this mirror of the universe, an old Taoist said hesitantly. Everyone in the back hall knew how they had taken back this precious treasure of the sect last night. The spiritual power has been greatly damaged. I'm afraid it will need to be refined for hundreds of years before it can be used again. Taoist Xuantian's face was so gloomy that it was about to drip water. He never would have thought that the Tai Chi diagram that had suddenly appeared would be so powerful that it had absorbed more than half of the mirror of the universe's spiritual power. At the bottom of it all, the reason the magic treasures refined by cultivators contained extraordinary might was because supreme energy was condensed from the essence of the heavens and the earth during the refinement of the magic treasures, and then it was sealed within the magic treasure. It was the original strength of the magical equipment. For magical equipment of the level of the mirror of heaven and earth, the original strength contained in it had long been integrated with the magical equipment itself. Unless the magical equipment was destroyed, the spiritual energy contained in the mirror of heaven and earth could not be extracted. Senior, that mysterious Tai Chi diagram is heading west. Could it be that the people of the Western Buddhist lands are secretly attacking us? The person who spoke was a thin Taoist. This old Taoist was Taoist Xuantian's junior, Taoist Xuanfa. As soon as Taoist Xintian said this, everyone in the back hall couldn't help but be moved. Although they had a vague feeling that what happened last night might have been caused by the people of the Western Buddhist lands, knowing it was one thing, but saying it out loud was another. I don't think so. The Tai Chi diagram from last night seems to belong to our Tao sect. Taoist Master Xian Tsong said with a serious expression. This was a matter between the Buddhist lands and Taoist sects, so the higher-ups of the Supreme Mystery Sect were very cautious. Chapter 29. In the blink of an eye, half a year had passed since the attack of the 6 Paths Demon King. In the past 6 months, the experts of the Supreme Mystery Sect had come out, and the mountain protection formation had been broken by the mysterious Tai Chi diagram. The Supreme Mystery Sect had to find a treasure that could replace the 81 strange stones to reactivate the mountain protection formation. On the Green Spirit Peak, after Gu Fei broke through to the 7th heaven, he often went into seclusion. He would sit in the cave for 10 days to half a month. This time, the stone door of the cave had been closed for more than a month. Moss had already grown under the stone door. Early in the morning, when the first light of dawn appeared, there was a strange sound coming from the Green Spirit Peak. It sounded like thunder, but also like the roar of thunder. However, this sound seemed to follow some kind of rule. Every time it rang, it caused the spiritual energy around the Green Spirit Peak to move. The essence of heaven and earth was rippling and undulating, but it did not converge in a certain direction. The sound coming from the Green Spirit Peak seemed to communicate with the heaven and earth. It was like the release of the original sound of heaven and earth, communicating with the heaven and earth, causing the void to vibrate. On the top of the Supreme Mystery Temple, 100 miles away, sat a purple-robed old Taoist. The old Taoist had the air of an immortal, and he exuded a transcendent aura. This Taoist was the head of the Supreme Mystery Sect, Taoist Xintian. Taoist Xintian was using a Taoist cultivation method. His 5 hearts faced the sky, and he breathed in and out. As Taoist Xintian breathed in and out, all the spiritual energy above the Supreme Mystery Temple was sucked in and entered Taoist Xuantian's body. Suddenly, Taoist Xintian seemed to feel something. After absorbing all the spiritual energy of the world, he opened his eyes. Suddenly, two rays of purple light shot out from his eyes, piercing through the faint smoke around him, and then gradually dissipated. Taoist Xintian turned his head in the direction of the green spirit peak, and his eyes flashed with surprise. That direction, this sound, could it be? Taoist Xintian seemed to think of something. His eyes flashed, and he stood up from the top of the temple. Heavenly thunder drum? How is this possible? Didn't the 10,000 immortals already die? How can someone cultivate that cultivation method to this level? Taoist Xintian frowned and thought, could it be that disciple of the 10,000 immortals? If it's really him, then it'll be interesting. Thinking of that, Taoist Xintian smiled and sat down again. He closed his eyes and no longer moved. On Emerald Spirit Peak, within the abode, Gu Fei sat cross-legged on a meditation cushion. As he inhaled and exhaled, the tendons and bones in his entire body emitted a sound that rumbled like muffled thunder, and it shook his tendons, blood, and meridians. This was different from the crackling sounds that were produced when his muscles and bones vibrated. The sound of the heavenly drum thunder seemed to have gradually taken shape, and it sounded like the heavenly drum thunder. Along with the rhythm of his breathing, it was as if a storm was blowing all over Gu Fei's body, inside and outside of his body. The air that gushed out from his pores caused a whirlwind to spin violently around his body. The seven heavens of awakening me was a dividing line. After successfully taking this step, the hidden treasures in Gu Fei's body were gradually revealed, and he began to touch the profound mysteries of the martial path. He had already cultivated his tendons, bones, skin, flesh, and internal organs. His body was one with the inside and outside, and there was no longer any difference between them. His profound qi was no longer blocked, and with a thought, it could reach every part of his body. Wherever the thought went, the power would go. Every move he made contained 1,000 caddies of power. Looking inside, Gu Fei's meridians were surging with a large amount of 5 elements profound qi. Each meridian seemed to have become divine, passing through his flesh, bones, and tendons. They were like rays of light that connected every part of his body. Gu Fei's chest and abdomen swelled, producing a thunderous sound. The entire cave slightly trembled under the sound waves. Waves of profound qi steamed out of his body and seeped into his tendons and bones, changing the marrow and changing the blood. A purer qi and blood were slowly being produced. This made Gu Fei feel as if he had been reborn. The rise and fall of his chest and abdomen gradually intensified, and the thunderous rumbling sounds in Gu Fei's body became more frequent. After the 9 revolutions, Gu Fei suddenly opened his eyes, and 2 beams of light shot out from his eye sockets. He then opened his mouth and spat out a stream of turbid air from his chest and abdomen. Whoosh! That turbid air was like an arrowhead that pierced through the void and shot out dozens of feet away, producing a sharp sound of breaking the air. Then, the 5-colored light that emerged from the surface of Gu Fei's body suddenly swelled, and then quickly entered his body. He stood up, and suddenly there was a burst of crackling sounds. There seemed to be a layer of luster flowing on his skin, and his body was even more powerful. After half a year of hard work, I have finally completely consolidated my cultivation of the 7th layer. With my current strength, I am afraid that even if I were to face an 8th layer cultivator, I would not be at a disadvantage. Dongfang Chen, I am looking forward to fighting with you. A cold smile appeared on Gu Fei's face. Dongfang Chen wanted to make a fool of himself in front of a crowd of people in the sect during the competition, but he had made a mistake. The 5 elements combat skill is definitely not inferior to the Tao. Although I have only touched the door, it is enough to defeat Dongfang Chen. As Gu Fei said this, he closed his eyes and recalled the introductory fist technique recorded in the ancient body refining technique, 5 elements fist. Then, he suddenly opened his eyes, and the essence of his body surged. A layer of bright golden light immediately penetrated from his body, and then he directly punched forward. Pung! A ball of golden light suddenly erupted from his fist, and the golden aura surged forward, illuminating the entire cave mansion in a golden color and causing the entire cave mansion to tremble. The golden light scraped the ground, and the hard rock floor was immediately silently shaved off a thin layer. The fist energy shook the void, making a rumbling sound like 10,000 horses galloping, and its power was unparalleled. Before Gu Fei's fist energy completely broke out, he quickly stopped, and the golden torrent that was like a rolling river suddenly dissipated. On Gu Fei's face, there was a trace of a satisfied smile. Although the Five Elements fist was a rough combat skill recorded in the ancient body refining technique, its power was not inferior to the Tao. He was confident that with his current strength, he could definitely enter the top 10 in the sect competition. Everyone said that I am practicing a trash martial art. This time, I will let all those who look down on me see how the trash in their eyes will trample them under my feet. Gu Fei's eyes burst out. He was bullied by the people in the sect, and he was looked down by the people in the sect. All of this would become the past. Subconsciously, Gu Fei touched the Tai Chi tattoo on his chest. His strength could be said to be brought about by the yin-yang jade pendant, which had almost integrated into his chest. Without the help of the yin-yang jade pendant, Gu Fei's cultivation would probably still be struggling at the awakened 3 heavens. The awakened 7 heavens, which was once out of reach for Gu Fei, had now become a reality. Although the yin-yang jade pendant showed great power on the night of the attack of the Demon King of 6 Paths, Gu Fei still felt a little scared. In the past 6 months, the yin-yang jade pendant did not show any strange behavior. Chapter 30. At noon, the melodious sound of a bell rang out on Taishan Mountain. The sound of the bell was not very loud, but it seemed to have some kind of power. It penetrated the void, ignoring the distance of space, and spread throughout the 9 peaks of Taishan for hundreds of miles. The bell rang 9 times, and then they saw the 9 peaks of Taishan, except for Taishan Peak. On the surrounding 7 spiritual peaks, several rays of light shot up, heading toward Taishan Peak. Then, the disciples of the various branches walked down from the other 7 peaks and gathered at Taishan Peak. The bell rang 9 times. That was the order for all the disciples of Taishan sect to gather. Those who heard the bell, no matter what they were doing, had to put down everything they were doing and rush to Taishan Temple to listen to the orders of the sect leader. On Green Spirit Peak, the stone door of the cave house slowly opened, and a young man in white came out. He was Gu Fei. Gu Fei looked up at Taishan Peak, which was 100 miles away, and there was a flash of excitement in his eyes. He murmured, "This day has finally come." Then, Gu Fei rushed down Green Spirit Peak. The magnificent Taishan Temple stood at the top of Taishan Peak, which was surrounded by 8 peaks. At the foot of the peak, there was an endless stream of disciples gathering from all directions. No one wanted to miss this once-in-a-decade event, and no one dared to ignore it. In the entire Taishan Mountain, it was absolutely impossible to see so many cultivators. Taishan sect was worthy of being one of the 3 great Taoist sects, a major cultivation sect of the Shinmen sect. In a short moment, thousands of cultivators had gathered on the square in front of Taishan Temple. 7 or 8 purple-robed Taoists stood at the front of the white jade steps. They were the elders of the major branches of Taishan sect, and they were all great cultivators of the Yushu realm. The disciples of the 9 branches stood neatly, with the purple-robed elders at the front, followed by the 2nd and 3rd generation disciples in green robes, and finally, the younger disciples of the 4th generation. The disciples of Taishan Peak stood in the center of the 9 branches, while there was only one person from Gu Fei's branch. Thus, a strange phenomenon was formed. A disciple in white stood at the front, seemingly on equal footing with the purple-robed elders. This was something that couldn't be helped. Gu Fei was the only one left among the Green Spirit Peak disciples. He stood at the very front and was really too eye-catching. A group of disciples couldn't help but be attracted by him. The elder Taoists were in a different mood. In the past, the disciples of the 9 branches of Taishan sect had dominated the world. What a breeze, what a spirit! But now, Green Spirit Peak was about to be extinct. The elders of the various branches couldn't help but sigh. In the face of the strange gazes, Gu Fei remained calm. His heart was neither sad nor happy. It was as calm as a mirror. No matter what others thought of him, it would not affect his state of mind. At this time, the melodious sound of the bell had already stopped, but the echo still lingered in the 9 peaks, lingering on for a long time. The disciples of the 9 branches of the Supreme Profound sect had all gathered in the square in front of the Supreme Profound Hall. The Supreme Mystery sect, which had been passed down for thousands of years, had no more than 1,000 disciples, and the majority of the younger generation were white-clothed disciples. On the path of cultivation, it was like thousands of people crossing a single log bridge. Those who were truly outstanding were very few. If a white-clothed disciple could not form a core of the way and break through to the realm of transcending mortality, then he would always be a 4th-generation disciple. He would not have any fate with the Great Path. He would be driven around by the sect until his lifespan was exhausted and he died of old age in the Supreme Mystery sect. Suddenly, a figure flashed in front of the main hall, and 8 old Taoists wearing purple robes walked out. The one in the lead held a horsetail whisk in his hand and had a smile on his face. It was the Supreme Mystery sect leader, Taoist Shintian. The heads of the 7 branches stood behind Taoist Shintian. "Greetings, leader." When the thousands of disciples in the square saw Taoist Shintian and the others walk out of the main hall, they immediately fell silent. Then, they all bowed to Taoist Shintian. Taoist Shintian stood at the top of the white jade steps in front of the square. He looked around at the disciples in the square and nodded slightly. He then said, "Dear disciples, you should know very well why you have gathered here today. Today is the beginning of the 9 branches competition of the Taishan sect, which is held every 10 years. After the competition, the Supreme Mystery sect will open its doors and accept disciples." After Taoist Xuantian's impassioned speech, the disciples in the square felt their blood boil. After that, the head of the Biyun Peak, the Xuanfa Taoist, came forward. The Xuanfa Taoist also looked around the square, then said, "The Supreme Mystery sect is a place where strength speaks. As long as you are strong enough, you can enter the ranks of high-level disciples. In the future, you can compete for the position of the heads of the branches, the elders of the branches, and even the position of the leader." The position of the Taishan sect leader? Gu Fei, who was standing in the front row, suddenly had a flash in his eyes, but then he suddenly realized something. "What I pursue is the limit of martial arts. I want to be the strongest. I don't want to waste any time fighting for fame and fortune." Xin Fa Daoist paused for a moment before continuing. "Of course, it's not easy to reach this level. I know that there are many outstanding talents among you, and after today, whether you will be a worm or a dragon will depend on your luck. Okay, I will now explain the rules of the 9 branches competition." All the disciples in the square suddenly perked up their ears. Although the 9 branches competition did not have much to do with most of them, in the 9 branches of Taishan, everyone wanted their own branch to be able to surpass the other 8 branches. Each of the 9 branches will send out the 10 strongest 4th-generation disciples to compete to determine the top 10 4th-generation disciples. In order to encourage the disciples to be diligent, the top 10 4th-generation disciples will receive a reward. When the Xuanfa Taoist said this, there was an immediate uproar among the younger disciples in the square. Of course, they knew what the reward was. "The reward is the soul-solidifying pill refined by the sect," the Xuanfa Taoist continued. "Soul-solidifying pill? It is useless to me." Gu Fei could not help but frown. Although he did not care about the soul-solidifying pill, it did not mean that others did not. The soul-solidifying pill. The eyes of the younger disciples in the square all lit up. This was a supplementary medicine that cultivators used to condense their essence, energy, and spirit to form a core of the path. If a cultivator at the 9th tier of the awakening realm took the soul-solidifying pill, their chances of forming a core of the path would increase by at least 30%. This 30% chance was not to be underestimated. Even if there was a pill that increased the chances by 10%, people would still fight to get it, let alone 30%. In the Taishan sect, those who took the soul-solidifying pill seemed to be able to successfully form a core of the path in their bodies. They were reborn and successfully entered the transcending mortality realm. Moreover, the soul-solidifying pill was not easy to refine. The method of refining it was a top secret of the Taishan sect. However, it would take about 10 years to refine a furnace of soul-solidifying pills. This was also why the Taishan sect held the 9 branches trials for the 4th-generation disciples every 10 years. After the competition, the top 10 disciples would be rewarded with soul-solidifying pills. And these people who received the soul-solidifying pills were originally the best of the fourth-generation disciples. With the help of the soul-solidifying pill, it was a matter of time before these 10 people formed a soul-solidifying pill. All right, go back and prepare. Tomorrow morning, the 9 branches trials will begin, the Xuanfa Taoist finally said. Chapter 31. Gu Fei came down from Taishan Peak. At the foot of the peak, he saw Zhao Ziru following her master, Yin Xingyun, to Purple Bamboo Peak. Zhao Ziru was a disciple of Purple Bamboo Peak, one of the 9 peaks of Taishan. In Taishan sect, it seemed that only Purple Bamboo Peak had female disciples. It was rumored that the previous chief of Purple Bamboo Peak was a female Taoist. Tomorrow was the day of the competition, and Gu Fei had to prepare well. With his current strength, although he was only at the 7th layer of Awakened Heaven, he was comparable to a cultivator at the 8th layer of Awakened Heaven. Among the young disciples of the 9 peaks, he was already one of the best. He was no longer a piece of trash who was looked down upon and bullied. Tomorrow, when he thought that he had finally waited for the day to come, Gu Fei could not help but feel a little excited. Watching Zhao Ziru's figure disappear into the mountain forest in the distance, Gu Fei also turned and strode toward Green Spirit Peak. On Taishan Peak, from time to time, 1 or 2 beams of light flew out and then into the 8 peaks that surrounded Taishan Peak. Taishan Mountain was indeed a blessed enclave. Taishan Peak was in the center, surrounded by the 8 peaks, and there seemed to be a trace of mystery that could not be touched. The existence of the 9 peaks of Taishan did not seem to be natural. However, between the 9 peaks, there was probably no one in this world except the Taishan sect leader, Taoist Xintian. In the 9 peaks of Taishan, there were many disciples in the realm of shedding mortality who had condensed their core of the way. Although disciples in this realm could not use their own strength to travel the 9 heavens without the help of external objects, but, with the help of magic treasures, disciples in the realm of shedding mortality could still enter and exit Qingming. Whoosh! Another sound came from the top of Gu Fei's head as he walked on the mountain road. A stream of light, like a meteor, shot into the distance. A huge wave of mana came down from the sky. Outside the forest at the foot of the mountain, Gu Fei, who was looking up, felt a strong wind blow against his face. Is this a cultivator in the realm of shedding mortality? Looking at the stream of light flying over his head and disappearing on a misty mountain peak 100 miles away, Gu Fei couldn't help but reveal a hint of fanaticism in his eyes. Roaming the 9 heavens, flying in the air, traveling 10,000 miles in an instant. When will I be able to soar into the sky? Martial cultivators could soar through the sky and burrow through the earth. Once they had achieved a small success, they could soar through the horizon. It was simply too difficult for a martial artist to achieve such a feat. One day, I, Gu Fei, will also be able to soar into the sky and roam the 9 heavens. Gu Fei's eyes were filled with determination. Humph! I'm afraid you have no hope of roaming the 9 heavens in this lifetime. All of a sudden, a voice rang out from behind Gu Fei. There was an almost imperceptible disdain in the voice. Who is it? After hearing this voice, all the hair on Gu Fei's body suddenly stood up. A layer of goosebumps immediately appeared on his skin. All the essence in his body was immediately sealed in his body, without a trace of it leaking out. He suddenly turned around and saw that on the shaded path, a person was slowly walking over with a faint smile. This person's eyebrows were like swords, and his eyes were like cold stars. He walked over with his hands clasped behind his back, but he brought with him an unfathomable aura that pressed towards Gu Fei. Humph! I was wondering who was eavesdropping on others. So it's you. When Gu Fei saw the person approaching, his aura rose again. A murderous aura immediately swept out from his body, as if he had transformed into a ferocious beast in an instant. In the mountains, Gu Fei often fought with all kinds of ferocious beasts. Over time, it was unknown how many ferocious beasts died in his hands. His body was contaminated with a murderous aura. The place where Gu Fei was located was outside a forest at the foot of Taishan Peak. A wide forest path, behind Gu Fei, passed through the forest and went straight to Taishan Peak. The person who came down from the forest path was Dongfang Chen. When Dongfang Chen saw Gu Fei staring at him like a ferocious beast, he couldn't help but be startled, and his eyes showed a trace of surprise. Why does this guy have such a strong, murderous aura? Killing intent was the aura of slaughter, and it was formed from the slaughter of all living beings. Cultivators paid particular attention to the natural way of the Tao, and while cultivating to comprehend the Tao, most cultivators comprehended techniques in silence, so this sort of killing intent very rarely appeared on cultivators. Gu Fei, don't tell me you want to compete with me now. Dongfang Chen stood 2 feet in front of Gu Fei, staring at Gu Fei like a poisonous snake, and said in a deep voice. At the same time, Dongfang Chen's body spread out a huge wave of spiritual power like a wave of water. Feeling the fluctuation of magic power from Dongfang Chen's body, Gu Fei felt threatened. His whole body suddenly trembled, and like a big whip, he swung from head to toe. Suddenly, a dense burst of thunderous sounds came from his body. His muscles and bones sounded at the same time, and the essence of the 5 elements instantly spread throughout his body. A faint layer of colorful light faintly appeared on his skin. His bronze-colored body exuded a strong sense of power. Every inch of muscle contained amazing explosive power. Gu Fei was like a ferocious beast in an extremely dangerous state. His whole body was tense, and he was about to pounce on his prey. At any time, he could suddenly explode and ruthlessly kill his opponent, tearing his opponent apart. I didn't expect this Dongfang Chen to be defeated by Lin Shui, of the Shangqing sect a year ago. Not only was he not depressed and dispirited, but he actually improved his cultivation. His strength is probably not much worse than the eldest senior brother of the Supreme Mystery Peak, Li Lingfeng. Gu Fei was secretly surprised. Although he did not notice Li Lingfeng outside the Supreme Mystery Temple, his name was like the shadow of a tree. Li Lingfeng was the disciple of the sect leader, and he was also the eldest senior disciple of the 4th generation of disciples. His cultivation was very high, and he was recognized as the #1 person in the younger generation of the Supreme Mystery sect. Gu Fei felt a great deal of pressure from Dongfang Chen. This Dongfang Chen seemed to have broken through to the 8th level of awakening. He was indeed an amazing talent. Among his peers, it would be difficult for him to meet a worthy opponent. Gu Fei sneered and said, "If you don't mind, we can have a fight first." Gu Fei was not afraid of him. Gu Fei was originally regarded as a cripple by the disciples of the other 9 branches. Even if he was defeated by Dongfang Chen, no one would say anything, because this was a matter of course. But Dongfang Chen was different. He was a proud disciple of an aristocratic family and an outstanding figure in the sect. If he was defeated by Gu Fei, it would be a big event that would shake the entire Supreme Mystery sect. Gu Fei had no scruples, but Dongfang Chen had a lot of scruples. Of course, Dongfang Chen would not act recklessly. He was not sure that he would win now. If that thing is on me now. Facing Gu Fei's arrogance, Dongfang Chen's eyes suddenly spat out 2 cold lights that were as sharp as blades. Dongfang Chen was very shrewd. Ever since he was defeated by Lin Shui, he became even more cautious. Humph. Tomorrow is the day of the competition. You and I have plenty of opportunities to fight. At that time, I will trample you under my feet in front of everyone. Chapter 32. At the foot of Taishan Peak, Gu Fei and Dongfang Chen met. The 2 of them were ready to fight, but Dongfang Chen suddenly retracted his powerful aura and went down the mountain. This made Gu Fei stunned, but after thinking about it, he also understood. This Taishan Peak was the cultivation place of the disciples of the 9 branches. After all, it was an important place in the sect. To fight here, it was simply not putting the disciples of the Taishan Peak in their eyes. Moreover, tomorrow was the day of the competition. Why rush? Oomph. Gu Fei watched Dongfang Chen's figure disappear down the mountain and couldn't help but snort coldly. Although Dongfang Chen was not easy to deal with the strength of a martial cultivator and the 5 elements battle skills that were not inferior to any Taoist techniques, Gu Fei was confident that he could defeat Dongfang Chen. At this time, Gu Fei's tense body also slowly relaxed. His muscles and bones relaxed, and the condensed power dispersed back into his flesh and blood. Gu Fei's ancient cultivation method had a special characteristic, and that was, before he fought, No one would know Gu Fei's true strength, because most of his power was hidden in his flesh and blood, and only when he fought with others would it burst out. Tomorrow, I don't know who will be trampled underfoot. Gu Fei didn't think much of it. Dongfang Qian was a good opponent, but he was destined to become his own whetstone. Gu Fei rubbed his chin, thought for a moment, then shrugged and left Taishan Peak. Among the disciples of the younger generation of the Taishan sect, there were not many people who were worthy of his attention. On Taishan Peak, inside the Taishan Temple, the huge hall was very empty. The headmaster, Taoist Xintian, sat on a white jade throne in the middle. On both sides of him sat 7 old Taoists. These were the heads of the 7 branches. Senior brother, are we really going to send the top 10 winners of the competition down the mountain? That is the disciple with the most potential among the younger generation of our sect. The head of Biyun Peak, Taoist Xuanfa, broke the silence in the hall. Yes, the ruined sky realm is a special place. It is impossible for us to let the masters of the sect enter. This is too risky, Taoist Xintian said indifferently. Taoist Xuansong of Full Moon Peak glanced at Taoist Xintian, who was sitting on the throne, and frowned. The ruined sky realm is full of unpredictable dangers. None of the disciples who have entered have been able to come out unscathed. It would be a pity if a few of the 10 disciples were killed inside. The average age of the top 10 young disciples of the Taishan sect was less than 20 years old, and they were already outstanding in their youth, showing that they were different from the rest. These 10 people might not be to say they of the geniuses of the Taishan of the sect. On the path of cultivation, as long as one was successful in cultivation, it was difficult to meet an opponent when they were young, and they surpassed their peers. These people who stood at the forefront of the younger generation were the focus of the sect's nurturing, because perhaps in a few decades, they would become great figures who could shake the heavens and earth. It was inevitable that outstanding people would receive attention. For example, Li Lingfeng of the Taishan sect and Dongfang Qian of the Biyun Peak. Their strength was unquestionable among the young disciples. In the world of cultivation, potential was the most important thing. No sect would let a disciple with unlimited potential fall into danger or even die young, because these people were the future of the sect. Taoist Xuansong's words made everyone look at each other. The heads of the 7 branches certainly did not want their outstanding disciples to take the risk. The head of Purple Bamboo Peak, Long Hongxue, pondered for a moment before he said to Taoist Zongxian, senior sect master, "It's worth it even if the 10 disciples have to take the risk for that thing in the ruins heaven realm. Longevity grass. As long as I can get the longevity grass, I have the confidence to break through to the demigod stage." Taoist Xintian could no longer maintain his composure when he said these words. Cultivators at the defending void stage could form a primordial spirit embryo and give birth to a Taoist primordial spirit or nascent soul, and enjoy a lifespan of 1,000 years. However, this did not mean that cultivators at the defending void stage could live forever. To truly live forever, one had to break through to the defending void stage, cast off their mortal bodies, and form an immortal body. The bottleneck of the 9th layer of the heaven stage had shackled Taoist Xintian for hundreds of years. The great limit of 1,000 years was only 200 to 300 years away. If he could get the longevity grass, his lifespan would be extended by 200 years. With these several hundred years of time, Taoist Xintian was really confident that he could break through the shackles of heaven and earth and become a legendary existence, a demigod. Longevity grass. The eyes of all the heads of the 7 branches lit up, as if they had seen a rare treasure. They could no longer conceal the excitement in their hearts. The longevity grass was a spiritual herb of heaven and earth that only existed in legends. If an ordinary person consumed it, they would be reborn and live a long life. If nothing unexpected happened, it would be easy for them to live for 100 or 200 years. When the longevity grass was discovered in the ruined sky realm, who knows how long it has been growing in the ruined sky realm? No one knows whether it has matured or not. Taoist Xuansong no longer insisted on his own idea, because the longevity grass was a major event that concerned the rise and fall of the sect. A demigod. If a sect had a demigod, as long as the demigod did not die, the sect would continue to prosper. A demigod was a terrifying existence that could live forever in the truest sense of the word. On the Tonglong continent, demigods were synonymous with invincibility. However, demigod experts had already disappeared. For thousands of years, there had not been a demigod on the Tonglong continent. The seven heads of the seven branches were all cultivators of the defending void stage, and they also desired the longevity grass. The allure of the longevity grass was irresistible to cultivators of the imperial void realm. Daoist Xintian looked around at the crowd and said in a deep voice, according to the state of maturity recorded in the ancient records, the longevity grass should mature in the next 100 or 200 years, but the other two sects are not easy to deal with. Purple Bamboo Peak's Chief Long Hongshues said worriedly, yes, the people of the Shangqing sect and the Guangxing Immortal sect are also determined to get the longevity grass. The ruined sky realm was discovered by the three great Taoist sects together. It is impossible that the people of the Shangqing sect and the Guangxing Immortal sect don't know about the existence of the longevity grass. Open strife and covert strife are inevitable. It depends on who is capable. Daoist Xuantian's voice suddenly turned cold. As his pupils shrank, two extremely sharp rays of light shot out from his eyes. The seven heads of the seven branches were immediately shocked, and their hearts trembled. This senior brother of the sect usually did not show himself and cultivated in the Supreme Mystery Hall, but he actually had such a competitive heart. In that case, I will now go and arrange for tomorrow's competition. The ruined sky realm will only be unaffected by those who have awakened me, Daoist Xintian said, stood up, bowed to Daoist Xintian, and walked out of the hall. The heads of the other six branches also left their seats and bid farewell to Daoist Xintian. At first, they had secretly planned to prevent their outstanding disciples from going to the ruined sky realm. But now, they could not wait for their disciples to fight for an extra spot. That way, more people would go to the ruined sky realm, and the chances of getting the longevity grass would be higher than those of the other branches. The three great Taoist sects were fighting openly and covertly, and the 9 branches of the Supreme Mystery sect were also fighting openly and covertly. In the main hall, after the heads of the 7 branches left, Daoist Xintian was left sitting on the throne of the sect leader alone. His eyes were incomparably deep as he looked out of the hall, and no one knew what he was thinking. Suddenly, he seemed to have thought of something, and then he called the Taoist child who was on standby outside the hall. Daoist Xintian ordered the Taoist child, "Go to Green Spirit Peak immediately and bring that Gu Fei to see me." Chapter 33. On Green Spirit Peak, Gu Fei was very surprised to see the summoning child. He didn't know why the sect leader wanted to see an unknown disciple like him. Before he obtained the Yin-Yang Jade Pendant, Gu Fei was just a good-for-nothing among the younger generation of the sect. He had only been in the sect for 8 or 9 years, but he was still lingering around the 3rd layer of awakening heaven. Now, why did the sect leader, Taoist Xintian, want to see such a lowly disciple in the sect? This matter had exceeded his expectations, and it caused Gu Fei to be surprised and bewildered. Could it be? Gu Fei thought of the Yin-Yang Jade Pendant that had merged with his chest and couldn't help but feel a little uneasy. But in front of the child, he didn't show it and acted as if nothing had happened. Outside the cave, the two walked down the mountain. Gu Fei finally couldn't help but ask the child, "Senior brother, do you know why the sect leader wants to see me?" The child walked in front and stopped when he heard this. "How would I know why the sect leader wants to see you? Won't you know when you get to the Supreme Mystery Hall?" Then, the child continued forward. The child's tone was a little impatient. He didn't seem to think much of Gu Fei. Among the 9 divisions of Supreme Mystery, Green Spirit Peak had been in decline for a long time. Now, Gu Fei was the only one left. Why would the disciples of the other branches care about Gu Fei? Gu Fei was rebuffed, but he smiled and didn't care. Now, the situation was stronger than he was. The other branches were strong, but his branch had completely declined. No one would care about the only heir of Green Spirit Peak. Only the strong would be valued, and only geniuses would be nurtured. Right now, Gu Fei was neither strong nor a genius in the sect. No one would look at him. This was the cruel reality of the cultivation world. This was a world where the strong preyed on the weak and the strong were respected. Weak ants would only be trampled under the feet of the strong and bullied at will. Without saying a word, the two of them quickly walked 100 miles. An hour later, the two of them arrived outside the Supreme Profound Hall. The Taoist boy returned to the main hall to report. "Come in." Then, a gentle and calm voice rang out in the hall. In Gu Fei's ears, it made him feel like he was bathing in the spring wind. When Gu Fei, who was standing outside the hall, heard this voice, he quickly tidied up his clothes and carefully walked into the hall. In Supreme Mystery Temple, no one dared to be arrogant, no one dared to be frivolous, and no one dared to be presumptuous. Gu Fei did not dare to raise his head to look up. The sect leader had summoned him, so it was inevitable that he would be a little nervous. This was because ever since he had entered the Green Spirit Peak, he had not entered the Supreme Profound Hall many times. Arriving under Taoist Xian Tian's throne, he stood still and bowed. "Greetings, sect leader." Gu Fei bowed to Taoist Xian Tian. "And dispense with the formalities." When Gu Fei entered, Taoist Xian Tian's seemingly turbid eyes looked up and down at Gu Fei. Vaguely, there was a flash of light in those turbid eyes. Taoist Xuantian's human path was divine, and he had long since reached the state of returning to his natural state. He sat on the throne, but he didn't release a single ripple of magical power. He didn't have a trace of an otherworldly aura. He was just like an ordinary old Taoist. Who would have thought that the Green Spirit Peak would fall to such a state? Taoist Xian Tian suddenly let out a long sigh. Back then, the Green Spirit Peak was not much worse than the other 8. However, this is the path that the Green Spirit Peak has chosen to walk, so you can't blame anyone else. Looking at the last successor of the Green Spirit Peak, Taoist Xian Tian couldn't help but feel a little uncomfortable. The 9 profound sects belonged to the same sect, and were the 9 great orthodoxies passed down by the founding ancestor. Now that the Green Spirit Peak had fallen to such a state, Taoist Xian Tian couldn't help but feel a little cold. Gu Fei did not dare to make a sound. He listened respectfully. Although he seemed calm, he was already feeling a little uneasy inside. The feeling of not knowing what would happen next made him feel as if there was a large stone weighing down on his chest. Tomorrow is the day of the 9 vein trials. I have a technique here that might be of some help to you. Taoist Xian Tian suddenly changed the topic. Then, he took out a jade slip from his sleeve and handed it to Gu Fei. Gu Fei was stunned. He didn't think that Taoist Xian Tian would call him here to teach him a technique. "But I don't cultivate Tao methods." In an instant, countless questions arose in Gu Fei's mind. But seeing Taoist Xian Tian hand over the jade slip, he didn't have time to think. He reached out with both hands and respectfully received the jade slip. "All right, you can leave." Taoist Xian Tian waved his sleeve and said indifferently, "Yes." Gu Fei quickly bowed to Taoist Xian Tian and then carefully left the Supreme Mystery Hall. Although he was full of questions, he didn't dare to ask. Seeing Gu Fei's figure disappear outside the hall, Taoist Xian Tian murmured, "I've been protecting this for hundreds of years. Whether or not you can comprehend anything from it will depend on your luck." Taoist Xian Tian stood up, walked down the throne, and then turned to the back of the hall. Returning to Green Spirit Peak, Gu Fei immediately entered the cave and closed the door. Then, he sat on the praying mat in the center of the cave and took out the jade slip. "Just what kind of technique did the sect master give me? Does it have something to do with the ancient technique I cultivate?" Gu Fei was very curious and impatiently returned to the cave. He focused his consciousness on the jade slip in his hand. Boom! The moment his consciousness entered the jade slip, an explosion sounded in Gu Fei's head. He felt the world spin around him and his soul tremble. His face instantly paled. At this moment, the jade slip in his hand emitted a faint golden light. Then, golden characters rushed out from the jade slip. The characters were incomparably ancient, and they seemed to be somewhat similar to the characters that the indestructible body had written on the stone at the bottom of the icy jade pool. Gu Fei immediately came to a realization. These words were probably ancient characters from the ancient times, a type of language that had disappeared in the long river of time. After the golden characters rushed out from the jade slip, they began to revolve around Gu Fei. The resplendent golden ancient characters seemed to be cast from gold and had an unfathomable aura. countless ancient runes suddenly emerged from the jade slip. Then, these ancient characters began to revolve around Gu Fei and began to reorganize themselves. Gu Fei did not know what these ancient characters meant, but he faintly felt that something was wrong. As expected, the moment he had this thought, the ancient golden characters around him suddenly gathered together and turned into a dazzling golden light. As if it had a mind of its own, it shot towards the space between Gu Fei's eyebrows. Gu Fei was instantly scared out of his wits. The space between the eyebrows was a fatal spot. If this condensed golden light hit him, what would happen to him? Chapter 34. After an unknown period of time, Gu Fei finally woke up. He hastily touched his forehead. Fortunately, he didn't seem to have suffered any injuries. However, the golden light formed by the ancient golden runes made Gu Fei's heart palpitate. At this moment, suddenly, Gu Fei felt that there seemed to be something extra in his mind. Then, a technique emerged from his mind. The ancient characters that rushed out from the jade slip once again gushed out from the depths of his memory. It was as if these characters had originally existed in his memory. Gu Fei could not help but be surprised. This method of directly imprinting the technique into one's memory was too incredible. This was simply a remarkable ability to modify one's memory. Only a few great cultivators would use this method to directly imprint the technique into the mind of their direct disciple, imprint it in their heart, and then directly pass it on to them. This jade slip. Gu Fei sat up again and reached out to pick up the jade slip that had fallen to the ground. He could not help but frown. He did not need to understand these ancient characters. He naturally knew the content of the technique. Weapon refinement? Gu Fei realized that this technique was a technique that allowed one to fuse weapons into one's body. It was one of the rare divine powers derived from martial arts. Why did the headmaster pass this technique to me? Where did this magic art come from? There did not seem to be such a technique among the all-encompassing techniques of the Taishan sect. This made Gu Fei unable to understand. It seemed that this technique had nothing to do with Taoist techniques. It was more like a remarkable technique that was specially prepared for martial cultivators. After all, martial cultivators' cultivation focused only on essence, qi, and spirit. They gave up on the physical body. This directly led to the martial cultivator's physical body not being strong enough. If the physical body was not strong enough, how could a divine weapon be melted into the flesh and blood of the body? If the physical body was not strong enough, if the divine weapon that was melted into the flesh and blood of the body was not controlled and directly condensed in the body, the martial cultivator would not only not be able to improve their combat power, but would also be seriously injured. But I do not have a weapon. Even if I have this technique, it seems to be of no use for the time being. As Gu Fei thought of this, he could not help but lose interest. There were only 3 things that could be considered treasures in his hands. Among these 3 things, only 2 of them had offensive capabilities. Of these 2 offensive treasures, one of them was something that he couldn't use. The talisman, the inner core of the Blackwater mystical serpent, and a purple stick. This was all Gu Fei had at the moment. Of course, the lineage of Ling Peak, after all, was once the most powerful of the 9 lineages of the Taishan sect. Of its glorious history, over the generations, there had been many masters who had left behind many treasures. However, ever since he changed to the ancient technique, the treasures left behind by these martial cultivators were stored in the storage room of the cave and were no longer used. The treasures of martial cultivators all had to be driven by spiritual power. The ancient technique was a body-refining technique, but what was cultivated was the essence of the source, not spiritual power. Therefore, Gu Fei did not have the ability to drive the weapons of martial cultivators. Therefore, the only thing that was useful to Gu Fei now was the inner core of the Blackwater mystical serpent that he had killed in the cave at the bottom of the icy azure pool. As for the talisman that he had snatched from Wang Yuanji, it was useless. He could not activate the power contained in the talisman at all. As for the stick that had been passed down from the sect, it was not made of gold or stone, so he did not know what it was used for. Could it be? Gu Fei took out the stick from his bosom and carefully examined it. There was nothing special about the stick except for the simple patterns that were engraved on it. It was very ordinary and very inconspicuous. Gu Fei did not discover anything new about the stick, but he still decided to give it a try. He followed the body-refining weapon technique and activated the essence in his body. Threads of essence immediately came out of his hands, and like countless colorful silk, they wrapped around the stick in his hands. Then, Gu Fei saw a shocking scene. The originally dull stick began to change. Slowly, a misty purple light appeared on the stick, as if it had turned into a crystal-clear purple jade. In the end, the rod turned into a streak of dazzling purple light and fused into Gu Fei's body. When the purple light appeared, the entire cave was filled with a cold aura, as if a divine weapon had been pulled out of its scabbard. Sword Chi? Gu Fei was shocked. He never imagined that the weapon body refining technique would actually be able to fuse the rod into his body. The stick seemed to be the hilt of a divine weapon. But what made Gu Fei puzzled was that the two ends of the stick were abnormally smooth, without any signs of being broken. If it was the hilt, then where was the blade? Looking inside, Gu Fei found that the purple sword chi that had merged into his body was swimming in his flesh. It could gather and disperse, but it did not completely merge into his flesh. He tried to control the strand of sword chi in his body. As expected, the strand of sword chi began to surge towards his right hand according to his will. Afterwards, a violet glow appeared in Gu Fei's right palm. An extremely sharp strand of sword chi condensed in his hand. Afterwards, a simple sword that gave off an ancient presence appeared in his hand. Gu Fei could feel that the sword hilt in his hand was a tangible object. It was that cudgel. As for the sword blade, it was not tangible. It was condensed from sword chi. The purple sword blade was close to a true divine weapon. The shock in Gu Fei's heart was at its peak. Why does the sect leader have a weapon tempering technique? Moreover, he knew that it was not a coincidence that the stick passed down by the sect could be stimulated by the body-refining weapon. There seemed to be a mystery behind everything that puzzled Gu Fei, but at this moment, it was impossible for him to figure out the secret behind it. Power. Only with the power to look down on the world could all the mysteries be easily solved. Swish! Gu Fei waved the long sword in his hand, and a bright sword light immediately slashed out. It rushed forward and seemed to directly cut the void. The sword light dissipated, and a sword mark appeared on the ground silently. Although he had never cultivated the sword Dao, Gu Fei was pleasantly surprised to be able to unleash such a sharp sword chi with a light wave. With this secret weapon in hand, he would be able to win the competition tomorrow by a surprise move. Moreover, if the stick that was integrated into his body condensed in his hand, it was equivalent to holding a divine sword in his hand. He would not be afraid of the sharp blade, and he could also hurt the enemy invisibly. Gu Fei's mind moved slightly. Swish! With a sound, he put the short stick in his right palm. The sword chi also disappeared and completely melted into his flesh and blood. Sure enough, this short rod had a great origin. Only by fusing it with the weapon body tempering art would one be able to bring out the might of this short rod. This inconspicuous short stick would have an amazing change. Something that could be discovered together with the ancient body refining technique was definitely not an ordinary thing. But it seemed that for hundreds of years, no one had integrated this sword hilt into the body and stimulated the power of the short stick. Was it because of the lack of this technique? Gu Fei did not know, and perhaps even his deceased master Wan Xianqing did not know. Perhaps the secret of this technique was only known to the head of the Taishan sect, Taoist Shintian, who taught the technique to Gu Fei. The more Gu Fei thought about it, the more he felt that this magical technique was very likely to be the secret between the Green Spirit Peak and Taoist Shintian. In the cave residence, Gu Fei sat cross-legged again and used the weapon refining technique to nourish the purple sword chi formed by the sword hilt with the 5 elements essence chi. Tiny rays of light emerged from Gu Fei's body, and waves of obscure yuan chi spread out from his body. The fluctuations were vaguely mixed with an incomparably fierce sword chi. He wanted to make his body and the sword chi fit together, and only through the process could he exert the greatest power of the sword chi. The weapon refining technique was now Gu Fei's trump card. Time passed unknowingly. The yuan chi in the cave residence was still fluctuating, but the sword chi gradually became purer, as if it had lost its sharpness and became obscure. Dang! Suddenly, Gu Fei, who was in a meditative state, heard a melodious bell sound. Originally, people who were in a deep state of cultivation, even if Mount Tai collapsed in front of them, they would absolutely not be disturbed. However, this bell sound seemed to penetrate the void and directly acted on Gu Fei's heart, awakening him from his meditative state. The bell sound was melodious, shaking between heaven and earth, lasting for a long time. Just as the bell sound was about to disappear, another bell sound rang out. Gu Fei hurriedly stopped cultivating and stood up from the ground. His eyes shot out like lightning as he murmured, "Is it finally going to start?" The door of the cave residence slowly opened, and a ray of sunlight shone in. Gu Fei, dressed in white, strode out from inside. He did not bring anything with him, and his hands were empty, but he was full of confidence because his weapon was not in his hand, but in his body. The weapon refining technique was so amazing that no one could sense anything strange in Gu Fei's body. The short rod that had fused with his flesh and blood was hidden in Gu Fei's body. As long as Gu Fei willed it, the short rod would appear from his body and become a divine weapon. It's daybreak. Gu Fei looked up to the east and saw a red sun hanging above the mountains on the horizon. The sun rose from the east, emitting endless light, illuminating the world. The melodious bell sound was still shaking between heaven and earth. At Taishan Mountain, the disciples of the 9 peaks and 9 lineages came out of their respective cultivation places and then went to Taishan Peak, which was surrounded by the 8 peaks. Gu Fei did not dare to be slow, because the 9 lineages trials would be held today. He hurriedly went down the mountain. As he walked through the forest, he picked a few fresh fruits from the trees next to him to satisfy his hunger. Taishan Mountain was a place of great heroes. There were countless wild fruits in the mountains, and they could be seen everywhere. But cultivators were very casual about their diet. When they were hungry and thirsty, they would drink from the mountain spring and eat wild fruits. This was the life of a cultivator. At least, this was what the cultivators of Taishan sect did. When Gu Fei came to the square of Taishan Temple, the disciples of the 9 lineages were almost all there. The disciples of the 9 lineages stood in the square in an orderly manner, led by their masters. Chapter 35. The sun rose in the east, and at the top of the steps in front of the Supreme Mystery Temple, there were 8 seats in a row. The head of the Supreme Mystery Sect, Taoist Shintian, sat in the middle, and on either side of him sat the heads of the 7 branches. At this time, the disciples of the 9 branches of the Supreme Mystery Sect had all gathered on both sides of the square below the steps. 9 circular arenas had already been set up in the square. Each arena was 10 feet tall and 15 feet wide. At this time, all the disciples were whispering about who would win today's competition and who would enter the top 10. The topic of the disciples revolved around Li Lingfeng, Dongfang Chen, and a man named Ziyu. No one would talk about Gu Fei of Green Spirit Peak, because, in the eyes of the young disciples, Gu Fei's cultivation was absolutely at the bottom of the younger generation. It was a waste of a spot for him to participate in the 9 branches trials. Li Lingfeng, Dongfang Chen, Ziyu? Gu Fei sneered. His eyes swept across the disciples, paying attention to the young disciples who might be his opponents today. He saw Dongfang Chen, and he also saw Wang Yuanji, who he hated. And among the outstanding disciples of the head of the sect, standing in front of all the young disciples, was a young man of about 20 years old. Gu Fei knew that person. He was the eldest senior brother of the head of the sect, Li Lingfeng. Since entering the sect, Gu Fei had not seen Li Lingfeng many times. This was because both of them were crazy about cultivation. They spent all their time on cultivation and rarely left the place of cultivation. Li Lingfeng was known as a cultivation genius. After entering the sect, he had stood out among the young disciples before the age of 20, awakening his cultivation at the peak of the 8th level of the sky, allowing him to sit firmly on the throne of the number 1 expert among the young disciples. He didn't have an outstanding appearance, nor did he have a slender figure. Li Lingfeng's appearance was very ordinary, but it was this unremarkable person who displayed extraordinary cultivation talent. It had to be said that in the world of cultivation, there were still some amazing people. In every era, there was no lack of geniuses. Li Lingfeng is definitely a good opponent, Gu Fei thought. As for Dongfang Chen, although he was also a strong opponent, after practicing the weapon refining body technique last night, Dongfang Chen was no longer a threat to him. This was not because Gu Fei was arrogant, but because of the intuition of a martial artist. Although Dongfang Chen was strong, Gu Fei did not think that Dongfang Chen could stop his pace. Warriors of the same realm were stronger than martial cultivators in close combat. Once a martial cultivator was closed in by a warrior of the same realm, it meant that this martial cultivator had already lost. In close combat, martial artists had an absolute advantage. Martial techniques were also killing techniques. Once they got close, they would either die or be injured. Even if they didn't get close, martial techniques and divine abilities could resist the spells of martial cultivators. Therefore, when a martial artist of the awakened seven heavens faced a martial cultivator of the same seventh heavens, the outcome was self-evident. He might even be able to put up a fight against an eighth heavenly layer cultivator. Standing behind Li Lingfeng was a handsome young man who exuded a delicate aura. That person must be Ziyu. He is indeed handsome, but he seems to be too handsome. He looks a bit like a girl. Gu Fei found that the young man's skin was fair and radiant. He even made people suspect that this person was a girl dressed as a man. At this moment, the head of the Biyun Peak, the Xuanfa Taoist, who was sitting next to Taoist Xintian, stood up and walked to the front. He looked around at the disciples on both sides of the square and said in a clear voice, "I hereby announce that the 9 Peaks competition has officially begun. Participating disciples, please come forward." Of the 9 Peaks of Supreme Mystery, the other 8 had sent out 10 disciples. Only the Green Spirit Peak had sent 1 person to participate, and that person was Gu Fei. As soon as the Xuanfa Taoist's voice fell, 10 young disciples walked out from each of the branches. Gu Fei also walked up. He was the only disciple of the Green Spirit Peak, so he was directly qualified to participate in the competition. Unlike the other branches, who had the advantage in numbers, they first had to compete internally before deciding who would go on stage. Thus, in front of the square, at the bottom of the steps, gathered 81 disciples in white. The competition to determine the top 10 among the younger generation of disciples would begin among these 81 disciples. As the disciples walked out, a middle-aged Taoist and 2 Taoist children walked down the steps at the same time. The middle-aged Taoist who was walking in front held a brush in his right hand and a book in his left. The 2 Taoist children who were following closely behind the middle-aged Taoist were carrying a wooden box together. The middle-aged Taoist walked down the steps and stood to the side. The 2 Taoist children carried the wooden box to the front of the disciples. Draw lots. The Xuanfa Taoist's voice spread throughout the square. Drawing lots to determine each disciple's opponent was the fairest method. Whether it was a good or a bad draw depended entirely on one's luck. The sect leader's eldest senior brother, Li Lingfeng, was the first to walk up. He reached into the round hole on the wooden box and took out a jade tablet. He then handed it to the middle-aged Taoist standing beside him. The middle-aged Taoist looked at the jade tablet, then waved his brush and wrote down a person's name in the book in his hand. Around the square, the surrounding disciples whispered to each other. They were all very curious as to who the opponent of the number 1 person in the younger generation of the Taishan sect would be. Who would be so unlucky as to meet an expert like Li Lingfeng in the first round? In the wooden box, there were 81 jade tablets with the names of 81 disciples written on them. Whoever was drawn would be their opponent. If their luck was so good that they drew their own name, then the disciple who drew their name would have to draw again until they drew someone else's name. After Li Lingfeng drew his lot, he retreated to the side. Then, the other disciples walked up one after another and drew their opponents from the wooden box. Gu Fei was not in a hurry to draw his lot. Among the disciples of the 8 branches, he found Zhao Ziru's figure. He was a little surprised that Zhao Ziru could actually be ranked in the top 10 of the Purple Bamboo Peak. At this time, Zhao Ziru also saw Gu Fei. She walked over to Gu Fei. "Senior brother Gu." Zhao Ziru greeted Gu Fei. She was not surprised to see Gu Fei here, because Gu Fei was the only one left in the Green Spirit Peak. It was already a matter of fact that he would participate in the 9 vein trials. "Junior sister Zhao, I didn't think you would also participate in the 9 vein trials." Gu Fei looked Zhao Ziru up and down and was a little surprised. Half a year ago, Zhao Ziru's cultivation seemed to be at the 5th level of the awakened realm, but today, this purple bamboo peak disciple seemed to have broken through to the 6th level. Under Gu Fei's burning gaze, Zhao Ziru couldn't help but blush. She said in a low voice, "Senior brother Gu, please show mercy in the competition later." Show no mercy, but if the opponent is junior sister Zhao, I will make an exception, Gu Fei said with a serious face. Good. Show no mercy, show no mercy, show no mercy. Suddenly, a disdainful voice came from beside Gu Fei. Then, a handsome young man in white walked past Gu Fei and Zhao Ziru with an arrogant expression. Dongfang Chen? Gu Fei stared at the young man walking towards him. His eyes flashed. I'll show you today. Anger rose in Gu Fei's heart. At this time, while Gu Fei and Zhao Ziru were talking, a small portion of the people had already walked up and drawn their opponents from the wooden chests held by the 2 Dao children. Senior brother, let's also go draw lots. Zhao Ziru said to Gu Fei when she saw that most people had already drawn their lots. Chapter 36. After the lots were drawn, a duel list was posted, and a group of disciples immediately gathered around to have a look. Through this method of drawing lots, every disciple who participated in the 9 Peaks competition would have 2 duels with the other 2 disciples. In the 2 duels, the disciple who won 2 duels and the disciple who won 1 and lost 1 would be able to advance to the next round of the competition, while the disciple who lost 2 duels would be eliminated. The reason why the next round of the competition was not decided according to the method of determining the winner or loser in one duel was that it would often bury the other disciples who had great potential and had a lot of room to play. For example, if Li Lingfeng were to fight against Dongfang Chen would be eliminated once he lost, and with Dongfang Chen's strength, he would definitely not stop there. Therefore, in order to avoid this kind of thing, each disciple had 2 duels. Even if one of the 2 duels was lost, he would not be eliminated because of it. Of course, if someone were to draw a strong opponent like Li Lingfeng, and he was drawn by another strong opponent, then he would be out of luck. Humph! I didn't expect that my second opponent would be him. Gu Fei was among a group of disciples. Looking at the duel list of the first round of the competition, a faint smile appeared on his face. Among the 2 opponents, one of them was an acquaintance. Who would have thought that the 2 of them would meet in the first round of the competition? Hee hee. Gu Fei, you're doomed to be unlucky this time. Suddenly, an eccentric voice came from the side. When Gu Fei heard this voice, he couldn't help but frown. He didn't need to look to know who the owner of this voice was. He was too lazy to pay attention to this annoying guy. However, this guy was very untactful. Seeing that Gu Fei was ignoring him, he didn't retreat, but instead came forward and whispered in Gu Fei's ear, "If you are willing to return the talisman to me, maybe I can ask Brother Dongfang to let you lose in a more dignified manner." Gu Fei fiercely turned his face around. His eyes were as sharp as a blade as he stared at the uninvited guest and said in a deep voice, "Wang Yuanji, I didn't expect you to be so shameless. Is this the so-called descendant of an aristocratic family?" That person was already afraid after being glared at by Gu Fei's sharp gaze. However, when he heard Gu Fei's words, his expression changed from shock to anger. The muscles on his face twitched slightly due to anger. Haha, good Gu Fei, you have guts. Wang Yuanji was so angry that he laughed. After saying that, he turned around and walked towards Dongfang Chen. It seemed like he was going to find Dongfang Chen to vent his anger for him. Some of the surrounding disciples had already noticed this scene, and they were all shocked. They couldn't understand why Gu Fei dared to provoke Wang Yuanji. In the Supreme Mystery Sect, the disciples of the Green Spirit Peak were all trash. This had already become a consensus among the disciples, and Gu Fei's cultivation had always been at the bottom of the younger generation of disciples in the sect. Why was he so confident this time? Was he not afraid that Wang Yuanji would settle the score with him? It turned out that the matter of Gu Fei defeating Wang Yuanji had not spread within the sect. This Wang Yuanji actually had some means to make the 2 disciples who had always been on good terms with him keep their mouths shut. Sure enough, Gu Fei saw that Wang Yuanji had said something to Dongfang Chen. Dongfang Chen's gaze immediately turned towards Gu Fei, his eyes flashing. However, no one would have thought that the current Gu Fei was no longer afraid of Wang Yang. This Wang Yuanji's cultivation was only at the peak of the 5th level, and Gu Fei's cultivation was already 2 levels higher than his. The current Gu Fei could defeat Wang Yuanji with one hand. So why would he care about this person who was far weaker than him? Even if it was Dongfang Chan, he was only a cultivator of the same level as him. Moreover, among cultivators of the same level, he naturally had an advantage and was stronger than cultivators of the same level. Senior brother, what did that Wang Yuanji come to talk to you about? Zhao Ziru walked over from the side and asked worriedly. She knew Wang Yuanji's character. He was a smooth and slick person among the young disciples. Nothing much. Gu Fei did not want Zhao Ziru to know about the grudge between him and Wang Yuanji. Just as Zhao Ziru was about to say something, suddenly, a melodious bell rang out from the supreme profound hall, causing all the disciples' spirits to rise. For a moment, the noisy plaza quietened down. The sound of the bell also interrupted the conversation between Gu Fei and Zhao Ziru. On the steps in front of the supreme profound hall, the figure of the profound technique Taoist appeared. He took a step forward and looked around at the countless disciples in the plaza. He said in a clear voice, "The competition begins." As he spoke, he flicked his sleeves, walked back to his seat, and sat down. The rumbling sound of the drum resounded through the sky, like the sound of war drums on the battlefield. When Gu Fei heard it, he suddenly felt his blood boil. It's starting. After a round of beating of the drum, the crowd of disciples swarmed towards the 9 arenas in the square. There were 9 arenas, and 18 people would fight at a time. Out of the 81 disciples participating in the competition, 9 rounds would be enough to complete their first round. Senior brother, I'm going up. Zhao Ziru was among the 18 people who went up for the first time. Gu Fei looked at Zhao Ziru and said, I wish you victory. Zhao Ziru's face inexplicably blushed, revealing a trace of shyness, and then she walked towards one of the arenas. The 9 arenas, from west to east, were lined up in a row, from the 1st to the 9th arena. Zhao Ziru's opponent was the 3rd arena. At this time, the disciples of the Purple Bamboo Peak had already gathered below the stage. Zhao Ziru's opponent was a disciple of the Full Moon Peak, named Chu Zhan. The disciples of the Full Moon Peak also came below the stage to cheer for Chu Zhan. Master! Zhao Ziru came below the stage and smiled at her master, Yin Xingyun. However, there was not the slightest trace of nervousness on her face. Be careful. Zhao Ziru's master, Yin Xingyun, instructed. Yin Xingyun was a charming middle-aged female Taoist from the Purple Bamboo Peak. She wore a green Taoist robe and looked very graceful. In a competition between disciples, one should stop at a certain point. However, a competition was, after all, a competition. Occasionally, there would be mistakes and injuries to the opponent. Zhao Ziru responded and stomped on the ground with her right leg. Her body immediately soared into the sky and landed lightly on the stage. Even without using any Dao techniques, one could still leap onto the Wenzhong Tall Arena. Zhao Ziru's appearance was as beautiful as a flower. Her white clothes were whiter than snow. The majority of the disciples below the stage, including those from the Purple Bamboo Peak, were male disciples. When they saw Zhao Ziru going up the stage, they immediately had a breathtaking feeling, attracting the attention of the male disciples below the stage. At this time, Zhao Ziru's opponent, Chu Zhan of the Full Moon Peak, also jumped onto the stage. The two of them walked closer to each other. When the distance between them was about 10 feet, they stood still. Chapter 37. Junior Sister Zhao, please. Chu Zhan did not dare to be negligent. He clasped his hands towards Zhao Ziru, then with a serious expression, he formed a hand seal and released all the mana in his body. A layer of misty fire immediately enveloped Chu Zhan, and a scorching aura immediately spread out from his body. Fire Dao technique? When Zhao Ziru saw the fluctuation of mana from Chu Zhan's body, she was immediately delighted, because she herself practiced the water purification Dao technique. As the saying goes, water and fire are incompatible. Among the 5 elements, water restrains fire. When water Dao technique is used against fire Dao technique, it has an innate advantage. However, Zhao Ziru's master, Yin Hengyun, who was below the stage, frowned and muttered, This Chu Zhan's cultivation is not low. Looks like there will be a tough battle. Senior brother Chu, defeat her. Junior sister Zhao, let him see the power of our Purple Bamboo Peak disciples. Full Moon Peak will win. Purple Bamboo Peak will win. Before the two of them even started fighting, the disciples below the stage began to cheer. However, in terms of numbers, Full Moon Peak had the advantage. Therefore, the shouts of Full Moon Peak disciples were clearly louder than those of Purple Bamboo Peak. TSK, this is not a competition of whose voice is louder. Although many of the Purple Bamboo Peak disciples thought so, their shouts became even louder. At this time, Zhao Ziru formed a hand seal and waves of visible ripples immediately spread out from her body. It was as if transparent waves had appeared around her, surging up and down. The heavy water vapor caused everyone's vision to distort. The fluctuation of mana that was emitted was not weaker than Chu Zhan's. Fireball technique. Chu Zhan let out a soft shout and waved his hands. Layers of fire surged and quickly gathered around him to form 9 large fireballs about a foot in diameter. A wave of heat surged out, and even the disciples watching the battle below the stage felt the unusual heat. Go! Chu Zhan pointed forward, and the 9 fireballs immediately turned into 9 rays of firelight and flew towards Zhao Ziru. The stage was instantly filled with fire and raging flames. Before the fireball even arrived, the powerful fire force had already caused ripples to form on the water screen in front of Zhao Ziru, causing her to feel a strong sense of oppression. Gu Fei, who was hiding among the Purple Bamboo Peak disciples, couldn't help but worry for Zhao Ziru when he saw this scene. Although water could subdue fire, if fire was strong enough, it could also subdue water. Both of them are at the 6th layer of the Awakening Self stage. I'm afraid it will be difficult for junior sister Zhao to defeat Chu Zhan. With Gu Fei's current cultivation of the 7th layer of the Awakened Heaven, his eyes had become a lot more sinister. The two of them were not in a hurry to win, so they first exchanged Dao techniques with their opponents. Even if Zhao Ziru and Chu Zhan's strength were about the same, it was impossible for either of them to completely overwhelm the other. Just now, when the water and fire collided, the loud sound attracted the attention of the disciples of the other branches who were watching from the side of the stage. Even the heads of the 7 branches and the head of the Taishan sect, Daoist Xintian, who were sitting on the steps in front of the square, cast a surprised look at the 3rd stage. Junior brother Long, that girl from your Purple Bamboo Peak is not bad, Daoist Xintian said to Long Hongxue, who was sitting next to him. The head of Full Moon Peak, Daoist Xuansong, frowned. How good were the eyes of experts like them? With one look, it was clear who had won and who had lost. Haha, senior brother sect leader is too kind. Long Hongxue laughed. He was proud that a disciple of his branch had won. Long Hongxue, the head of Purple Bamboo Peak, was one of the few leaders of the 7 branches who did not use a Dao name. He had a Dao name, but when he was young and roamed the world of cultivation, he used his real name. Very few people knew his Dao name. On the 9 arenas, other than Zhao Ziru and Chu Zhan on the 3rd arena, who were locked in a stalemate for a moment, the people on the other 8 arenas had already decided the victor one after another. You are Gu Fei of Green Spirit Peak? Just as Gu Fei was watching the battle of the Grand Elders, a gentle voice suddenly came from beside him. Gu Fei quickly turned his head and saw a young man in white standing behind him. When Gu Fei saw the young man's face, his eyes lit up. This was a young man who could make beautiful women jealous, because he was handsome to the point of being evil. His appearance was not inferior to Zhao Ziru's. Chapter 38. Let's talk somewhere else, Ziyu said, then walked to a place with fewer people. Although Gu Fei had some doubts, he still followed. The others were focused on the fierce battle in the ring, so no one noticed the interaction between Gu Fei and Ziyu. Why are you looking for me? After the two stood still, Gu Fei said straightforwardly. He was very curious why this outstanding disciple of the Taishan Peak's leader would look for him. I heard that you and Dongfang Chun seem to have some misunderstanding. Ziyu did not pretend and went straight to the point. The friction between Gu Fei and Dongfang Chin did not hide from the ears and eyes of those who were observant. Humph! It was that Dongfang Chun who looked for me. Although I don't want to cause trouble, If trouble insists on looking for me, I don't mind getting rid of this trouble. Gu Fei rolled his eyes, and two cold lights suddenly shot out from his eyes, shooting straight at Ziyu's handsome face that could be described as demonic. Facing Gu Fei's eyes that were as bright and sharp as stars, Ziyu's heart trembled for no reason. He saw a trace of killing intent in Gu Fei's eyes. This actually made the outstanding disciple of the sect leader feel awe in his heart, and a trace of uneasiness emerged from the bottom of his heart. In this instant, he knew that the only disciple of the green spirit peak in front of him had already expressed obvious hostility towards him. This was not a good thing. Cough, cough. Ziyu coughed twice, calmly suppressing the trace of uneasiness in his heart, and then said with a smile, "Don't misunderstand. I have no ill intentions. It's just that I want to remind you, don't force Dongfang Chun into a corner, otherwise you will be in danger." When Ziyu broke into a smile, Gu Fei actually felt his eyes light up. He simply thought that Ziyu was not a man, but a peerlessly beautiful woman. This kind of feeling was very absurd. Oh? Then many thanks for senior brother's reminder. Gu Fei's hostility towards Ziyu immediately disappeared. He smiled disapprovingly, and then turned his gaze back to the battle in the ring. Seeing that Gu Fei did not seem to care about his advice, Ziyu was somewhat helpless, and then said, "That's all I have to say. Junior brother, be careful. I'm going to go on stage. I won't see you off." Gu Fei turned around and nodded to Ziyu. Ziyu smiled, then turned around and walked down the steps in front of the square. Over there, Li Lingfeng seemed to glance unintentionally at Gu Fei. Ziyu, Li Lingfeng, the branch of the head. Gu Fei continued to stroke his chin and pondered for a moment. First, the head had passed on to him a method of weapon refinement, and now it seemed that both Ziyu and Li Lingfeng were paying attention to him. Why would the branch of the head of Taishin Peak pay attention to him? This made Gu Fei unable to understand. Suddenly, there was a clamor in front of him. Gu Fei hurriedly looked up and saw that on the third ring, the battle between Zhao Ziru and Chu Zhan had already reached a white-hot stage. On the ring, dozens of water dragons bared their fangs and brandished their claws. They were not really formed from water, but formed from the power of water of the 5 elements, vast and mighty water elemental power surging out. It could be seen that Zhao Ziru had already displayed her water elemental Dao techniques to the fullest extent, and that full moon peak disciple, Chu Zhan, had already displayed all of his skills. Countless firebirds soared around him, and waves of terrifying heat waves caused the surrounding air to seem to have evaporated. The water dragons and firebirds continued to bite and pounce, constantly vanishing. The water dragons surrounded the firebirds from all directions, and that Chu Zhan stubbornly held on. His hands repeatedly formed seals, and streams of spiritual power poured into the firebirds around him, causing their power to increase greatly. And Zhao Ziru, who was hidden in the heavy waves, also formed seals and sent her own spiritual power into the dozens of water dragons, extinguishing the seemingly endless firebirds around Chu Zhan. Chu Zhan withdrew his power, as if he was already at a disadvantage. In fact, even if he was at a disadvantage, he still had the ability to counterattack. He was waiting for an opportunity, and the outcome was still unpredictable. The onlookers could see clearly, and Gu Fei had already noticed Chu Zhan's strangeness and vaguely guessed his intentions. He was a little worried that Zhao Ziru would fall for it, and thought that he had already completely suppressed Chu Zhan. If the situation really continued to develop like this, it was very likely that Zhao Ziru would lose this match under Chu Zhan's counterattack. However, the high-level disciples of Purple Bamboo Peak could already see Gu Fei's worry, especially Zhao Ziru's master, Yin Hengyun, whose brows were already tightly knitted. During the match, reminders were not allowed. Everything depended on how Zhao Ziru grasped the battle technique and rhythm. Only by tempering herself in battle would she truly improve. The disciples of Full Moon Peak, on the other hand, had already stopped cheering for Chu Zhan, and were all nervously watching the two people fighting on the arena. Although Chu Zhan was at a disadvantage, it did not mean that he did not have a chance. Thus, the surroundings of arena number 3 quietened down. However, Chu Zhan was destined to lose. On the arena, a vast wave of spiritual power suddenly spread out, and then, a white jade seal with water vapor lingering around it appeared above Zhao Zairu's head. From the seal, a vast amount of water elemental energy was released, and in an instant, the water elemental energy on the arena became extremely dense, and the firebirds around Chu Zhan dissipated one after another. Chu Zhan was immediately shocked, and without thinking, he stretched out his right hand, and a red flag the size of a palm immediately appeared in his hand. Black tortoise seal? Master Xin Song, who was sitting high up on the platform, immediately changed his expression. He did not expect that Long Hongxue would actually give the treasure of Purple Bamboo Peak, the black tortoise seal, to a young disciple to use. With the black tortoise seal in hand, Zhao Zairu was equivalent to being invincible within the awakened sixth heaven, and even if she faced an opponent of the awakened seventh heaven, she would be able to contend against them. It could be said that Zhao Zairu had already won this match. At this time, the white jade seal floating above Zhao Zairu's head, which caused people's hearts to palpitate, had already been infused with spiritual power by Zhao Zairu, and it quickly expanded to the size of a small mountain, then smashed towards Chu Zhan. It was as if a huge mountain was moving, or as if a vast lake was pouring down from the sky. This part of the world was completely enveloped in the boundless power of water, and countless transparent ripples submerged the arena. Roar! Under the black tortoise seal, Chu Zhan roared again and again. He desperately poured spiritual power into the small red flag in his hand, and the small flag in his hand suddenly burst into a dazzling flame. The small flag in his hand instantly became a large flag surrounded by raging flames, and a huge shape of a firebird rushed out of the flag. The firebird erupted with a terrifying temperature and immediately evaporated the water dragon formed by Zhao Zairu's spiritual power. It was extremely ferocious. Fierce flame flag? Master Long Hongxue of Purple Bamboo Peak, who was sitting next to Master Xian Tian, saw Chu Zhan use the large flag to resist the black tortoise seal, but he was not surprised at all. The master of Supreme Mystery Sect, Master Xian Tian, had a smile on his face as he watched the disciples on the 9 arenas compete. His gaze did not seem to be paying attention to that arena. Zhao Zairu and Chu Zhan used the black tortoise seal and the fierce flame flag respectively. The momentum was extremely great, and it immediately attracted the attention of the disciples of the other branches in the square. Everyone looked towards the 3rd arena in shock, and their gazes were all attracted by the tense scene on the arena. Gu Fei was no exception. However, he was wondering if the short stick that he had fused with his weapon refinement technique, which could unleash sharp sword chi, could contend against the black tortoise seal and the blazing flame flag. Chu Zhan waved the large flag, and raging flames soared into the sky. Countless huge firebirds emitted boundless flames and rushed into the sky, colliding with the black tortoise seal that was smashing down from the sky. Using such a powerful magic treasure consumed an astonishing amount of Fa. Chu Zhan only waved the fierce flame flag a few times, and his face became pale, as if all the Fa in his body had been sucked out. At the same time, Zhao Zairu did not feel good either. Using the black tortoise seal also consumed a large amount of Fa. She also seemed to be abnormally tired, and her clothes were already drenched in sweat. Rumble. The black tortoise seal that was directly smashing down from above Chu Zhan's head seemed unstoppable, and the space under the seal began to tremble. The huge firebirds that rushed into the sky collided with the black tortoise seal that was the size of a small mountain, and only ripples appeared. They could not stop the large seal from smashing down. Chapter 39. Chu Zhan waved the live flame flag. Above the vermilion flag that was wreathed in raging flames, there were firebirds that were so realistic that they looked like fire phoenixes. They emitted an unparalleled heat as they flapped their wings and charged towards the black tortoise seal. However, the black tortoise seal that was as big as a small mountain above Chu Zhan's head directly smashed the firebirds that were charging towards it. When the firebirds exploded, the burst of raging flames was like a small sun that appeared in the sky, causing the spectators below the stage to be unable to look directly at it. The result of this match was already very obvious. Chu Zhan's body was already on the verge of collapse. In front of Zhao Zairu, who was activating the black tortoise seal, he was already powerless to turn the situation around. Rumble. The black tortoise seal descended, and the vast and mighty power of water was like a surging ocean in the sky. The gazes of everyone in the square were already attracted by the power emitted by the black tortoise seal. Junior Zhao has already won. The black tortoise seal of the purple bamboo peak is indeed extraordinary. Seeing this scene, Gu Fei already knew that Chu Zhan's defeat was already a foregone conclusion. As expected, as the black tortoise seal in the sky slowly pressed down, the boundless power of water came down mightily and pounced towards the fire birds that were charging towards it. The power of fire emitted by the live flame flag was gradually suppressed. A large flag was waved by Chu Zhan and made a fluttering sound. However, the fiery light emitted by the live flame flag began to dim. Zhao Ziru formed a seal and pointed towards the black tortoise seal in the sky. Instantly, a water-blue energy surged out from the seal like a surging river and swept down from the sky. In an instant, Chu Zhan, who had almost exhausted all the Fa-Li in his body, was sent flying out of the stage. At this moment, Chu Zhan could not even hold the live flame flag firmly in his hand. He simply did not have any power to resist and was sent flying into the sky. The crowd of Full Moon Peak disciples below the stage could not help but exclaim loudly. Then, they saw a middle-aged Taoist wearing a green robe soar into the sky. With a wave of his right hand, the live flame flag immediately flew out from Chu Zhan's hand. It quickly shrunk to the size of a palm and fell into the hands of the middle-aged Taoist. Then, the middle-aged Taoist caught Chu Zhan with one hand and lightly floated to the ground. Chu Zhan was still exhausted. The middle-aged Taoist stared coldly at Yin Hangyun of the purple bamboo peak. A trace of fierceness flashed in his eyes, and he carried his disciple and walked away. Chu Zhan's cultivation was just a little bit weaker than Zhao Ziru's, but Zhao Ziru's magic weapon, the black tortoise seal, was not an ordinary item. Although this black tortoise seal was not the genuine black tortoise seal that was passed down from the ancient times, but it had been painstakingly refined by generations of purple bamboo peaks chiefs, its power could be imagined. Chu Zhan's cultivation was only slightly weaker than Zhao Ziru's. However, Zhao Ziru's treasure, the black tortoise seal, was not ordinary. Although this black tortoise seal was not the genuine treasure that had been passed down from ancient times, it had been refined by the heads of the purple bamboo peak. Its power could be imagined. After Zhao Ziru defeated Chu Zhan, she waved her hands and shot out seals towards the big seal in the sky. The surging water element power immediately retreated like the tide and entered the black tortoise seal. After that, the black tortoise seal spun in the sky, turning from big to small, transforming into a fist-sized white jade seal with blue light lingering around it. Zhao Ziru waved her hand, and the crystal-clear white jade seal flew back into her hand. Holding the black tortoise seal, she jumped off the stage. Zhao Ziru's master, Yin Hangyun, led his disciples to welcome her. Zhao Xueqi, on the other hand, looked around. She was looking for someone, but she only saw that person's back disappear into the crowd. The sect leader of the Supreme Mystery Sect and the 7 faction heads, who were sitting on the steps of the plaza, were not surprised by the result of the third arena. However, the expression of the head of the Full Moon Peak, Taoist Xiansong, was a little ugly. This Chu Zhan was an outstanding disciple of Full Moon Peak's younger generation, and he also had Full Moon Peak's magic treasure, the live flame flag. He originally thought that with the power of the live flame flag, even if his cultivation was slightly weaker than purple bamboo peak's Zhao Ziru, he still had a chance of winning. However, Taoist Master Xiansong did not expect Long Hongxue to hand over the black tortoise seal to this disciple. Taoist Master Xiansong could not help but feel a little indignant. The 9 Meridians General Trials were held once every 10 years. Although it was said to verify the level of Tao techniques that the younger disciples had learned in the past 10 years, it was also, to a large extent, a contest between the 9 meridians of Taishan. Each meridian wanted to overwhelm the other meridians in the trials. Taoist Master Xiansong said indifferently, "Junior Brother Long, I didn't expect you to use the black tortoise seal. It seems that you want your purple bamboo peak disciples to enter the top 10 before entering the ruined sky realm to train." His favored disciple, Chu Zhan, had already been defeated. Taoist Master Xiansong thought of Long Hongxue's intentions. The trip to the ruined sky realm was related to the longevity grass. If one more disciple entered the ruined sky realm, their chances of obtaining the longevity grass would be higher than the other sections. Haha. Don't tell me senior brother Xian Song has the same idea as me? Long Hongxue smiled. He was in a good mood. His disciple, Zhao Ziru, had already won a match. Even if she lost the second match, she would still be able to enter the second round. All right, junior brothers, let's just watch the next match. Taoist Master Xian Tian, who was sitting in the middle, raised his head to look at the sky. He then waved his sleeve and interrupted their conversation. Taoist Master Xian Tian knew the personalities of his two junior brothers. Even though they had cultivated for hundreds of years, their competitive nature had not diminished in the slightest. If the two were to continue talking, they would definitely start arguing again. Oh, that kid from Green Spirit Peak is going up. At this moment, a lone figure entered Taoist Master Xian Tian's field of vision. That person was Gu Fei. His first match was against one of the 9 branches, the young disciple of Morning Sun Peak, Li Hao. Li Hao was a slender youth with a thin face. He was less than 20 years old, but he had a hint of maturity that did not match his age. This was a person with a story. The first time Gu Fei laid eyes on this youth, he had this feeling. This person might have experienced things that others had not. Only by going through trials and tribulations would one mature. Take Gu Fei, for example. For the past 10 years, he had been looked down upon by all the disciples of the 9 sections. Everyone thought that after he cultivated the ancient body tempering technique, he was crippled on the path of cultivation and had no more achievements. Just like that, Gu Fei's mind had been tempered after being looked down upon, bullied, and even stepped on by others over the past 10 years. As a result, he had become stronger than most people who had never experienced such things, and his cultivation heart had become even firmer. Now, he focused on his heart. Whatever he thought, he would act accordingly. He would not let his mind be shackled at all. Only by doing as he pleased could he perform as he pleased. On the path of cultivation, if there were too many shackles in one's heart, too many worries, it would be very difficult to cultivate the cultivation method to the extreme realm. Only by maintaining a pure and innocent heart at all times could one walk further on the path of cultivation. Bang! Gu Fei arrived at the bottom of the 7th arena. His feet kicked off the ground, and his body shot into the sky like an arrow before landing on the arena. At this moment, Li Hao also leapt into the air and landed on the arena. Please, please. Chapter 40. Gu Fei fiercely shook his muscles and bones, and his entire body immediately emitted a thunderous explosion. Then, his legs pushed off the ground, and his entire body bounced up like a spring. Like an extremely fierce tiger, he pounced towards Li Hao with the momentum of a tiger descending a mountain. At the same time as he pounced forward, Gu Fei's hands stretched forward, and his 5 fingers closed. His fingertips pointed downwards, like a tiger's claws, and directly clawed towards Li Hao's head. This was exactly the move of a tiger pouncing on its prey, but it was used by Gu Fei to face his opponent. The dragon rides the clouds, the tiger follows the wind. This pounce of Gu Fei was exactly the momentum of a tiger pouncing on its prey. Suddenly, a gust of wind appeared out of nowhere, rushing towards Li Hao. A fiendish aura immediately pervaded the arena. Li Hao suddenly saw Gu Fei's pounce, and couldn't help but be startled. The gust of wind hit his face, and in that instant, it was as if he had seen a tiger pouncing towards him. The Jade Spirit Peak did not cultivate Dao techniques. This was something that all the disciples of the Taishan sect knew, and Li Hao was no exception. He had already prepared to deal with Gu Fei's attack, but he had never expected that Gu Fei would use such a unique attack. This had already exceeded Li Hao's expectations, and it caused him to be secretly shocked. 5 elements illusion, earth perplexing steps. Li Hao was also not an ordinary person. To be able to step onto the arena, he was an outstanding disciple of the Shaoyang Peak. Of course, he would not be frightened by Gu Fei's pounce. He hurriedly chanted a technique, and his body immediately surged with a misty, sand-like light. In the next moment, Li Hao's figure disappeared within this sand-like light. Boom! Gu Fei directly pounced towards the misty, dust-like earth qi. Without the slightest hesitation, the thick earth qi was immediately dispersed in all directions by the force of his pounce. Earth-type Dao technique? Gu Fei's heart went cold. At this moment, the cloud of dust didn't disperse, but it enveloped the entire arena, and Gu Fei's line of sight was immediately obstructed. Below the stage, the spectators' vision was also obstructed, and they couldn't clearly see what was happening on the stage. When the disciples of Shaoyang Peak saw Li Hao use an Earth Attribute Dao technique to trap Gu Fei in an Earth Attribute energy, they couldn't help but shout excitedly, cheering for Li Hao. In their eyes, it was far too easy for the outstanding disciple of their rising sun peak to win this match. After all, with Gu Fei's reputation as a good-for-nothing, no one believed that he would be able to defeat Li Hao. However, none of them knew that Li Hao, whom they thought highly of, had just been frightened by Gu Fei's pounce. Gu Fei's strength could not be underestimated, and Li Hao felt danger from his body. Li Hao hid within the gray, dust-like Earth Attribute energy. Activating his Dao technique, he drove the vast and heavy Earth Attribute energy towards Gu Fei. Gu Fei immediately felt as if the space around him had solidified, and a powerful force surged towards him from all directions. The gray Earth Attribute energy was about to pounce on his body. Oomph! Gu Fei gave a cold laugh, and all the muscles and bones in his body trembled. At the same time, the heavenly drum of thunder sounded, and at the same time, the huge amount of essence qi within his muscles, bones, blood, and flesh surged violently. A wave of qi immediately spread out from his body, forcing away the thick Earth Attribute energy that had surged towards him. However, Li Hao was hidden within the cloud of energy, and for a moment, Gu Fei couldn't determine Li Hao's exact position. He's in the dark, but I'm in the light. Gu Fei carefully sensed the ripples around him, and his eyes exploded with rays of light. He swept his gaze around, and his gaze seemed to pierce through the thick layer of Earth Attribute energy that surrounded him. Bind! Suddenly, a cold voice filled with hostility came from within the thick Earth Attribute energy. Then, Gu Fei felt a strong wave of transcendence energy coming from his right. Immediately after, within the surging, sand-like Earth Attribute energy, Qi, Qi. The sound of Qi rang out, and one after another, earth-yellow chains as thick as a child's arm shot out from within the gray, dust-like Earth Attribute energy. From all directions, they wrapped around Gu Fei. As Li Hao launched his attack, the transcendence energy that exploded from his body was immediately captured by Gu Fei. Gu Fei abruptly leaned over the arena, and then his body was like a python, sticking close to the surface of the arena. So, with a qi sound, he scurried towards the right like lightning. The countless chains formed from Earth Attribute energy that had wrapped around Gu Fei immediately missed, and from within the thick Earth Attribute energy came a cry of surprise. He then heard plop. The sound of a heavy object falling to the ground came from the thick, gray Earth Attribute energy on the arena. Then, the thick Earth Attribute energy that enveloped the arena seemed to have lost some kind of power binding it. It could no longer condense and quickly dissipated. In the end, the thick Earth Attribute energy completely disappeared, revealing the two people on the arena. Of the two people, one was standing, and the other was lying on the arena, as if they had already fainted. When the disciples of the Shaoyang Peak below the arena saw the appearance of the person standing on the arena, they immediately became excited. What's going on? What happened? Why is he the winner? Not only the disciples of the Shaoyang Peak, but the disciples of the other branches were also extremely surprised when they saw the winner of the 7th arena. Zhao Ziru, who saw this scene from afar, revealed a trace of a smile on her face. As for Dongfang Chen and Wang Yuanji, who were closely watching the 7th arena, when they saw the person standing on the 7th arena, their expressions couldn't help but change. Sitting on the steps in front of the Supreme Mystery Hall, the sect master of the Supreme Mystery Sect, Taoist Xintian, looked at the person on the 7th arena with interest. He wasn't surprised. However, when the heads of the 7 branches sitting next to Taoist Xintian saw the winner of the 7th arena, their eyes revealed a trace of surprise. Green Spirit Peak. This branch seems to have produced a pretty good disciple, The heads of the 7 branches were very clear that the ancient cultivation method of the green spirit peak was very difficult to cultivate, but once it was successfully cultivated, it could display strength that far surpassed cultivators of the same level. It was for this reason that the Jade Spirit Peak lineage abandoned the Tao and focused on cultivating this ancient cultivation method after obtaining it. However, no one was able to cultivate this ancient cultivation method to the transcending mortality realm, which ultimately led to the decline of the Green Spirit Peak. The victor standing on the 7th arena was none other than Gu Fei. Over the past year, apart from cultivating in the cave dwelling, whenever he had time, he would go into the depths of the mountains to fight with fierce beasts. Over time, he had learned some simple, direct, but powerful and practical fighting techniques from the fierce beasts he had killed. Tiger Pounce and Snake Movement were 2 of them. Gu Fei used the Snake Movement technique to avoid the attack of the Shaoyang Peak disciple Li Hao's Earth Attribute Dao technique. He instantly rushed to Li Hao's side and chopped at the artery in his neck, causing him to faint and fall to the ground. Li Hao's Dao technique immediately collapsed. Chapter 41. The only remaining disciple of the Jade Spirit Peak, Gu Fei, had defeated the outstanding disciple of the Shaoyang Peak, Li Hao. Almost everyone's eyeballs almost fell to the ground, especially the younger generation disciples of the 9 Supreme Mystery Meridians. They couldn't believe their eyes. Many people knew that just a year ago, Gu Fei was bullied by the disciple of the Tongtian Peak, Wang Yuanji, without the slightest ability to fight back. Now, Gu Fei seemed to have been reborn and easily defeated Li Hao. This result was difficult for the disciples of the Shaoyang Peak to accept. Of course, among the younger generation disciples, there were still a few people who knew of Gu Fei's strength. Ziyu was not surprised that Gu Fei could win. As for Dongfang Chun, he had already listed Gu Fei as one of his strong opponents. Even if he were to face Li Hao of the Shaoyang Peak, he would not be able to win so easily. Congratulations on your victory, senior brother. Zhao Ziru had been paying close attention to the battle between Gu Fei and Li Hao. Gu Fei had defeated Li Hao, which surprised her greatly. After Gu Fei jumped down from the arena, she went up to greet him. "It's just luck," Gu Fei said indifferently. Although he said so, his eyes were filled with confidence. He thought, is a cultivator at the peak of the 6th heaven only a so-so? Senior brother Dongfang, look. In a corner of the square, Wang Yuanji and Dongfang Chun stood together, coldly looking at Gu Fei and Zhao Ziru. Wang Yuanji said fiercely. Dongfang Chan snorted coldly, looking at Gu Fei with incomparably cold eyes. He was also a little surprised that Gu Fei had defeated Li Hao, but it was more fun this way. He wanted to personally end Gu Fei's footsteps. Li Hao is really trash. He actually lost to Gu Fei. Wang Yuanji was filled with hatred. He couldn't wait for Li Hao to teach Gu Fei a lesson. Enough. Your own cultivation can't compare to that Li Hao. If he's trash, then what are you? Hearing this, Dongfang Chun couldn't help but frown and impatiently say, if the Wang family and the Dongfang family did not have such a friendship, Dongfang Chun would not stand up for Wang Yuanji and provoke people like Gu Fei. This Gu Fei is definitely not simple. If he was pretending to be a pig to eat a tiger before, then this person is really scary. Dongfang Chun said indifferently. Pretending to be a pig to eat the tiger? That's impossible. Wang Yuanji said in surprise. He knew about Gu Fei. A year ago, he, Wang Yuanji, could easily play with Gu Fei in the palm of his hand. Dongfang Chun pondered for a moment, then said, if that's not the case, then something that we don't know happened to Gu Fei, and these things are enough to greatly increase his cultivation. It was not a coincidence that Dongfang Chun was able to become the eldest disciple of the sect leader, Li Lingfeng, and sit firmly in the 2nd position of the younger generation of the 9 branches of the Supreme Mystery Sect. According to the information revealed by Wang Yuanji, he guessed the situation of Gu Fei. You mean a fortuitous encounter? Gu Fei got lucky? If Wang Yuanji still didn't understand what Dongfang Chun was referring to, then he was the #1 fool in the world. You send someone to carefully check what Gu Fei has done and where he has been in the past year. Dongfang Chun vaguely guessed something and ordered Wang Yuanji. Yes, brother Dongfang. Wang Yuanji quickly responded. The current Wang Yuanji, as long as it was something that was not good for Gu Fei, He was willing to do it, and he would do it. With that, Wang Yuanji turned around and left to contact the so-called friends he had made in the Supreme Mystery Sect. This was the advantage of being a disciple of an aristocratic family. He had a wide network and many friends. Even if he was a playboy, there was absolutely no lack of scoundrels around him. Because behind the disciples of aristocratic families, there was the power of the family as a backer. What some people really valued was not Wang Yuanji, but the Wang family behind him. Just like Dongfang Chun, he had always disapproved of Wang Yuanji's actions and did not want to have too much interaction with people like Wang Yuanji. However, the Wang family and the Dongfang family in the cultivation world of the state of Qi were inextricably linked. In this way, even if he, Dongfang Qin, hated Wang Yuanji, he had to stand up for him. At this time, Gu Fei, who was talking to Zhao Ziru, suddenly seemed to feel something and turned his head to look at Dongfang Qian. Their eyes collided in an instant, and sparks flew. Both of them could see the strong hostility in each other's eyes. Humph! Dongfang Qian, you standing up for Wang Yuanji is the most stupid thing to do. Gu Fei's pupils contracted, and a cold light burst out from his eyes. Gu Fei, don't be too proud. I will step on you in the arena. A cold smile appeared on Dongfang Qian's face. In the face of Gu Fei's sharp eyes, he was unmoved. The two of them were separated by at least 40 to 50 meters. Without saying anything, the two of them could see what the other wanted to express in the other's eyes. All of a sudden, in the hearts of Dongfang Qian and Gu Fei, a feeling of heroes cherishing heroes, a feeling of heroes cherishing heroes, a feeling of heroes cherishing heroes. Senior brother Gu. Zhao Ziru followed Gu Fei's gaze and found Dongfang Qian. Her heart couldn't help but move. It seemed that there was something wrong with Dongfang Qian and senior brother Gu. Dang! At this moment, a bell rang in the Supreme Mystery Temple. Gu Fei and Dongfang Qian withdrew their gazes at the same time. It turned out that the 81 young disciples who participated in the 9 Peaks trials had finished their first match. When the bell rang, the Xuanfa Taoist, who was sitting high on the steps, stood up and walked forward. The young disciples all walked toward the Xuanfa Taoist. The first match is now over. All disciples can temporarily disperse and rest for a while. The second match will be held in the afternoon. The Xuanfa Taoist looked around at the disciples below and said in a clear voice. Then, Xintian Taoist and the other heads of the 6 branches immediately stood up from their seats and walked into the Supreme Mystery Temple. The first match of the 9 Peaks trials was over. Some of the 81 outstanding disciples who participated in the competition were happy, while some were sad. The person who won the first round was naturally the one who was happy, but the person who lost the first round was definitely not happy. In the first match, other than Gu Fei's unexpected victory over Shaoyang Peaks Li Hao, there didn't seem to be such a good thing happening in the other matches. Without any suspense, Li Lingfeng, Ziyu, and Dongfang Qian easily defeated their respective opponents and successfully advanced to the next round of the competition. As for those who lost, they still had a chance to advance to the next round. In the second match in the afternoon, as long as they could win, they could also advance to the next round. Only the disciples who lost in both matches would be completely eliminated. After Zhao Ziru separated from Gu Fei, she returned to the group of Purple Bamboo Peak disciples. Gu Fei, on the other hand, sat cross-legged under a pine tree in a secluded area of the plaza, resting with his eyes closed. In the second match in the afternoon, his opponent was Dongfang Qian. Facing an opponent like Dongfang Qian, Gu Fei didn't dare to be careless because he felt a lot of pressure from Dongfang Qian before. The Biyun Peak definitely had a great treasure. If Dongfang Qian used a powerful treasure during the competition, like the black tortoiseshell of the Purple Bamboo Peak, it would be very difficult for him to win against Dongfang Qian. This was the advantage of martial cultivators. Although their bodies were not as strong as martial artists, they had the help of treasures. With Dao techniques and treasures, martial cultivators could display strength that exceeded their limits. Therefore, if a martial cultivator had a suitable treasure in hand, their attack power would multiply. This was common knowledge in the world of cultivation. Gu Fei sat under the pine tree. The blood, flesh, and bones in his body were slowly surging. The essence of the 5 elements was transformed from his flesh and blood and then gathered in his dantian, forming a five-colored ball of light. Then, the ball of light in his dantian dimmed and spread out waves of essence of the five elements into his muscles, bones, flesh, and blood. This cycle continued without end. His body gradually emitted rhythmic explosions. Gu Fei's cultivation had already reached the level of changing marrow and exchanging blood. The new blood and qi in his bone marrow were slowly replacing the original blood and qi. The new blood and qi contained a huge amount of essence. It flowed throughout his body and expelled impurities, causing his body to transform. The skin that was exposed outside of Gu Fei's clothes flowed with an imperceptible luster. It was as if there were threads of light flowing under his skin. To cultivate the body against the natural order, Gu Fei wanted to refine his body into a treasured body. Even though he was still miles away from a true treasured body, it could not be denied that his body was advancing in that direction. In the distance, many disciples of the other 8 factions were pointing at Gu Fei under the pine tree. They seemed to be discussing Gu Fei and the battle between Gu Fei and Li Hao just now. The voices of those discussions drifted into Gu Fei's ears. These words were mostly negative and not praise for Gu Fei. However, whether they were good or bad, Gu Fei ignored them and did not care at all. The words of others could not cause Gu Fei's mind to waver. They could not affect his state of mind at all. Only by maintaining one's original heart and not being disturbed by external things could one move forward bravely on the path of cultivation. At this time, after the Xuanfa Taoist announced that the competition was temporarily suspended, temporary tents were quickly set up around the square for the disciples who were participating in the competition to rest. The disciples who did not participate in the competition were not allowed to disturb the disciples who were resting in the tents. In the first round of the competition, not everyone was like Gu Fei, Li Lingfeng, Dongfang Qian, Ziyu, and the others, who defeated their opponents with overwhelming strength as soon as they entered the arena. Most people would only emerge victorious or defeated after a round of intense battles with their opponents. The magic power that was consumed in the competition could not be recovered without a period of time to regulate one's qi and regulate one's yuan qi, as well as breathing. During this time, no one went to disturb Gu Fei. There were 2 reasons for this. One was that Gu Fei was no longer the same as before. The strength he had displayed made the few people who were hostile to him feel fear. The second reason was very simple. Today was a once-in-a-decade event for the Taishan sect. No one dared to cause trouble in the square of the Supreme Mystery Hall. In the square, there were too many eyes watching everything. If anyone wanted to cause trouble, they would not be able to escape the eyes of those who had the intention. Therefore, the square was very quiet. The disciples of the 9 branches only dared to talk in low voices. They did not even dare to speak loudly. After noon, it gradually moved to the west. For hours later, there was another crisp sound of a bell in the Supreme Mystery Hall. Then, the head of the Supreme Mystery Sect, Shintian Taoist, walked out of the Supreme Mystery Hall. Behind him were the 7 heads of the Supreme Mystery 7 branches. Coming to the steps in front of the hall, Shintian Taoist and the heads of the other 6 branches sat on the seats at the top of the steps. The Xuanfa Taoist, who was in charge of the 9 branches competition, walked straight up. The time has come. I now announce that the second round of the competition will now begin. Although the voice of the Xuanfa Taoist was not very loud, it spread to every corner of the square. It even spread out of the Supreme Mystery Peak and lingered between the mountains. Gu Fei, who was sitting cross-legged under a pine tree at the side of the plaza, opened his eyes and stood up. Immediately, a series of crackling sounds erupted from his body. At this time, Gu Fei had already walked under the ring, and Dongfang Chun also came under the lead of his master, Taoist Danyang. Behind Taoist Danyang was not only Dongfang Chun, but also a group of Biyun Peak's younger generation disciples. There were dozens of them. On the other hand, Gu Fei was alone. In the entire Jade Spirit Peak, he was the only one left. Dongfang Chun walked out from behind his master and looked at Gu Fei coldly. Then, without saying a word, he jumped onto the ring lightly and stood in the southeast corner. The mountain breeze blew, and Dongfang Chen's clothes fluttered in the wind. His handsome appearance, slender figure, and indifferent expression made him exude an elegant aura. Such an aura made many of the younger generation disciples under the ring feel inferior. This, perhaps, was the temperament of an amazing genius. Oomph! Gu Fei sneered, then jumped up and stood in the northwest corner of the ring. This Dongfang Chun is very scheming. He seems to be standing casually, but he occupies the southeast corner. Gu Fei thought. Southeast was above, and northwest was below. With such a position, Dongfang Chun faintly suppressed Gu Fei. In fact, in a competition, how to stand was also a skill. Junior brother Xin Fa, do you think that disciple of yours can win this competition? Taoist Xin Tian, who was sitting high up on the stairs, suddenly smiled and said to the Xin Fa Taoist. The Xin Fa Taoist couldn't help but frown. Seeing that the other heads of the branches were looking at him, he calmly said, although the disciples of the Jade Spirit Peak are much stronger than ordinary disciples in the same cultivation realm, I still have confidence in my disciples. Haha, that Gu Fei's cultivation is at the 7th layer of heaven, and your disciple. Looks like it will be a fierce battle. Taoist Xintian didn't know what to say. After all, this concerned the face of the Xin Fa Taoist. Suddenly, the head of the Purple Bamboo Peak, Long Hongxue, asked Taoist Xintian, Senior brother, do you still remember Wan Xianqing from the Jade Spirit Peak? Of course I remember. Junior brother Long. Why are you talking about him? Taoist Xintian looked at Long Hongxue with some confusion. Haha. Wan Xianqing once used the cultivation of the 9th layer of heaven to shake an ascended mortality cultivator. Long Hongxue laughed. A trace of displeasure flashed across the Xin Fa Taoist's face. Long Hongxue, aren't you saying that the most outstanding disciple of my Biyun Peak can't compare to Gu Fei from the Jade Spirit Peak? The heads of the various branches were very clear about the cultivation methods of the Jade Spirit Peak. The path of martial cultivation in the Jade Spirit Peak was much more difficult than the path of Dao cultivation. However, among the same level of cultivators, Jade Spirit Peak disciples were stronger than Dao cultivators. Their battle strength could be said to be heaven-defying. He felt his wrist tighten, as if it was strangled by an iron hoop, and then he was pulled forward by a strong force. At this time, Gu Fei's left fist had already fiercely hit Dongfang Chen's lower abdomen. Chapter 43. No one thought that the battle between Gu Fei and Dongfang Chen would be decided in an instant. This scene happened very quickly, so quickly that the spectators outside the 9th ring were shocked. Turning his fist into a claw, he hooked his opponent's wrist and dragged it in front of him. At the same time, his left fist punched towards his opponent's abdomen. Gu Fei's movements could be said to be done in one breath. His movements were extremely fast, as if he had already thought of how to make his move. However, during a battle, the situation could change in an instant. It was impossible for Gu Fei to predict how Dongfang Chen would make his move. Gu Fei didn't have the ability to predict, so his reaction was nothing more than a warrior's instinct. In an instant, he could use the most direct, practical, and effective combat skills according to the situation. The moment Dongfang Chen's wrist was grabbed by Gu Fei, he knew that he was too arrogant. He thought that after being defeated by Lin Shui from the Shangqing sect a year ago, he could easily defeat the person in front of him. However, he didn't know that the moment they exchanged blows, his opponent had already put him in a difficult situation. This made this genius not only angry, but also angry. Roar! The moment Gu Fei's fist hit his abdomen, Dongfang Chen let out an angry roar. Then, a powerful force erupted from his body, and a bright golden light emerged from his body. Bang! With a loud bang, Gu Fei's fist landed solidly on Dongfang Chen's abdomen. The powerful force that was stored in his fist immediately burst out like a flood. A circle of ripples that could be seen with the naked eye spread out from Dongfang Chen's fist. Pung! The clothes on his upper body were instantly torn to shreds by the explosive power of Gu Fei's fist and flew all over the sky. Gu Fei deliberately wanted to teach Dongfang Chen a lesson. Therefore, he didn't hold back because it was a competition between fellow disciples. The powerful fist force directly smashed Dongfang Chen into the air. In the exclamation of the audience, Dongfang Chen rolled in the air, jumped out of the ring, and fell out in a parabola. As long as his feet touched the ground under the ring, he would lose. Disciple. Below the stage, Dongfang Chen's master, Taoist Danyang, could not maintain his composure and exclaimed. However, this was the 9 pulse trials, and Taoist Danyang could only be anxious. He could not help. Dongfang Chen lost like this? Li Lingfeng, who was watching the match from afar, could not help but feel surprised. At the same time, he became wary of Gu Fei's fierce battle skills. This is the combat skill of the Green Spirit Peak? Interesting. When fighting with this person, you must not let him get close. Ziyu, who was standing next to Li Lingfeng, looked at this scene with interest. Just when everyone thought that Dongfang Chen was going to lose, a golden armor appeared on Dongfang Chen's body. At the same time, a ball of golden light rushed out like a white butterfly at the same time that Dongfang Chen's clothes exploded. Dongfang Chen, who was flying backwards, repeatedly made a hand sign, and the golden light suddenly spread out. At this time, everyone could clearly see that this was not a golden light, but a magic weapon that emitted a golden light. This was a magic weapon that looked like a moon-shaped moon. It was round, as if a round part of the moon had been dug out, leaving a circle of extremely sharp edges on the side. This circle of edges was not closed, leaving a gap. As soon as this magic weapon appeared, the high-ranking disciples of the Supreme Mystery Sect knew that this Dongfang Chen had temporarily escaped from the predicament of defeat. Sure enough, when the moon-shaped magic weapon suddenly expanded to the size of a face, whoosh! With a bang, it flew to Dongfang Chen's feet and lifted Dongfang Chen, who was about to fall to the ground. Golden Moon Wheel? On the steps, Taoist Xintian, who was sitting on the throne, couldn't help but frown when he saw this scene. Looks like these junior brothers of mine are really thinking of ways to let their own disciples win. Senior brother Xintian, isn't that your magic weapon, the Golden Moon Wheel? The words of the head of the Shaoyang Peak, Taoist Chaoyang, sounded sour in the ears of the heads of the major branches. Li Hao, a disciple of the Shaoyang Peak, had lost to Gu Fei before he could even use his magic weapon. This made Taoist Chaoyang feel ashamed. He couldn't wait for the disciples of the Biyun Peak to lose to Gu Fei like this. When Taoist Xintian heard this, a trace of displeasure flashed across his face. He was the host of the 9 Peaks tournament. Taoist Chaoyang's words were clearly saying that he was biased towards his disciples. Taoist Chaoyang saw that Taoist Xintian did not respond, so he turned his attention to the 9th ring. He wanted to know how Gu Fei of the Chui Ling Peak would deal with the counterattack of Dongfang Chen. The battle between Gu Fei and Dongfang Chen also attracted the attention of the higher-ups of the Taishan sect who were watching the battle in front of the palace. This was not a normal battle, but a battle between a martial cultivator and a martial cultivator. Dongfang Chen rode the golden moon wheel of the Biyun Peak, rose into the air, and returned to the ring. He silently reached out and wiped the trace of blood from the corner of his mouth. There was a fierce look in his eyes as he stared at Gu Fei. Then he exerted force on his feet and directly threw the golden moon wheel at Gu Fei. The golden moon wheel, shrouded in golden light, suddenly turned into a golden blade, rotating at high speed and slicing towards Gu Fei's waist. Dongfang Chen, who was wearing golden armor, flipped in the air and landed on the stage. On the abdomen of the armor, a faint fist mark could be clearly seen. This was the mark left by Gu Fei's punch. It could be seen that even with the protection of the armor, Dongfang Chen had suffered a strong impact. The fist force shook his body and caused minor internal injuries on the spot. Swish! Gu Fei used the desolate steps, leaving an afterimage in place. He flashed past the golden blade and rushed toward Dongfang Chen. A powerful aura surged forward, and the essence of his body surged. His skin was crystal clear, as if it was covered with a layer of faint 5-colored light. The power of the 5 elements surged under his skin. The golden moon wheel cut through the afterimage, turned in the air, and attacked Gu Fei from behind. At the same time, Dongfang Chen's hands formed a seal, and a huge wave of spiritual power surged from his body. His hands repeatedly shot out golden lightning, attacking Gu Fei. On the ring, in an instant, the sound of thunder and golden snakes danced wildly. Dongfang Chen had suffered a loss once. This time, he would never let Gu Fei get close to him. The attack of Dao techniques and the assistance of magical treasures seemed to give Dongfang Chun an absolute advantage. The golden moon wheel of the Biyun Peak? Watch how I break your magical treasure. This time, Gu Fei did not dodge the golden moon chakram that shot towards him. He did not even turn his head. Instead, he stretched his left hand backward and directly grabbed at the golden moon. At the same time, he pressed his right hand forward. A golden aura surged out of his right palm and blocked the golden lightning that bombarded him from the front. When everyone below the stage saw that Gu Fei was actually trying to grab the golden moon wheel behind him with his bare hands, they could not help but be greatly shocked. How could the treasure of Biyun Peak, the golden moon wheel, be touched by a person of flesh and blood? Chapter 44. Seeing Gu Fei grabbing the golden moon chakram with his bare hands, even the controller of the golden moon chakram, Dongfang Chun, was taken aback. As a disciple of the Biyun Peak, he knew the power of this treasure of the Biyun Peak. Was Gu Fei confident that he could block the golden moon chakram? In a competition between fellow disciples, if the opponent was seriously injured or crippled, he would inevitably be punished. However, when Dongfang Chun thought of the punch that Gu Fei had landed on his body, he hardened his heart. He no longer cared if Gu Fei's palm would be crippled by the golden moon chakram. He repeatedly made hand seals, and when he raised his hand, he constantly shot golden lightning at Gu Fei. At the same time, he used his divine sense to control the golden moon chakram to strike at Gu Fei. On the other hand, Gu Fei remained calm under Dongfang Chun's fierce attacks. He pressed his right palm forward and a surging golden aura swept forward like a huge wave, blocking the incoming lightning bolts, not allowing them to take a single step forward. At the same time, his left hand that was reaching out to grab the golden moon chakram suddenly turned purple and was surrounded by a purple aura. When Gu Fei's 5 fingers touched the golden moon chakram, there were a few slight clanging sounds. This was the sound of metal colliding. Gu Fei's left hand seemed to have turned into indestructible gold. He actually grabbed the golden moon chakram of the Biyun Peak. What a strong power of the metal element! When the 5 fingers of Gu Fei's left hand touched the golden moon chakram, his body immediately shook a few times. He only felt a strong, sharp, and incomparably sharp power of the metal hit his 5 fingers and palm, making his left hand numb. The golden moon chakram almost flew out of his hand. Under the impact of the golden moon chakram, the power of the metal element palm in front of him immediately weakened. Boom! With a loud bang, a golden lightning bolt as thick as a child's arm broke through the golden wave-like aura and collided with Gu Fei's right palm. Ding, ding, ding. Gu Fei retreated 3 steps. The powerful and explosive power of thunder and lightning immediately attacked his arm from his right palm. On his forearm, tiny golden electric currents flashed chaotically. The sleeves on his forearm were instantly burned to ashes by the golden electric currents. From this, one could see how powerful the golden lightning was. Oomph! With a thought, Gu Fei's right arm shook, and the power of the 5 elements immediately burst out from the muscles, bones, and flesh of his right arm. The power of thunder that invaded his forearm was immediately forced out. With another burst of crackling, the golden electric current disappeared in the void in the blink of an eye. After using all his strength to attack Gu Fei with a thunder palm, Dongfang Chun could no longer attack Gu Fei with thunder and lightning. He quickly pinched the Tao formula to control the golden moon chakram, operated the spiritual power in his body, and pointed forward. Gu Fei suddenly felt the golden moon chakram in his left hand. All of a sudden, the golden light shone brightly, and then, a huge power of the metal element burst out from the golden moon chakram. Countless sharp golden rays violently collided with his hand like divine needles, causing his left hand to feel a trace of pain. Then, Gu Fei's left hand shook, and the 5 fingers that grabbed the golden moon chakram were bounced off by the power of the metal element. A golden moon-like light rushed out from his hand and flew back to Dongfang Chun's side, circling around him. The golden moon chakram was taken back, and Dongfang Chun's heart was at ease. If the golden moon chakram of the Biyun Peak was taken away by Gu Fei, then he would lose a lot of face. Although the round of fighting between Gu Fei and Dongfang Chun was short, it could be said to be thrilling. The disciples of the 9 lineages who were watching the battle were stunned. Because of the surprise, their mouths were opened so wide that a duck egg could be stuffed in. The strength shown by the two was impressive, especially the performance of Gu Fei, which was even more shocking. He could actually compete with Dongfang Chen head-on and was not at a disadvantage. Did the Green Spirit Peak really have a genius? And it was a genius who was transformed from a good-for-nothing? Gu Fei's performance broke everyone's view of the Green Spirit Peak. Weapon refining body. I didn't expect this little boy to master this magical power overnight. The head of the Taishan sect, Taoist Xintian, who was sitting on the top of the steps and watching the battle, noticed that Gu Fei's left hand suddenly turned purple. He looked at Gu Fei with a bit of appreciation in his eyes. At this time, the purple color on Gu Fei's left hand had faded, and his palm had returned to its original color, but the disciples watching the battle below the stage had already seen this strange phenomenon on his left hand. Especially the 7 heads of the 9 lineages, who were many times more intelligent than the average young disciple, they had already vaguely noticed that there seemed to be something strange in Gu Fei's body. However, the weapon refining body technique was too amazing. It was able to fuse the divine weapon into the flesh and blood. Even the 7 heads of the 9 lineages felt a trace of strangeness in Gu Fei's body, but for a moment, they did not know what was wrong with Gu Fei's body. He grabbed the sharp blade of the Golden Moon chakram with his bare hands, but he was not injured? How is this possible? Although the Taoist Xuanfa did not show it on the surface, he was already shocked. The Golden Moon chakram was the most precious treasure of the Biyun Peak. After being refined by several generations of Biyun Peak's heads, its power was so great that it was not much worse than the black tortoise seal of the purple bamboo peak. Moreover, the Golden Moon chakram was a magic treasure of the metal attribute. It contained a huge amount of sharp metal power, not to mention flesh and blood. Even if it was a divine weapon made of the essence of the 5 metals, it would still be able to cut it in half. Could it be that Gu Fei's body had actually been cultivated to the point where it was even stronger than the essence of the 5 metals? Impossible. Absolutely impossible. Everyone felt that it was inconceivable that Gu Fei could grab the Golden Moon chakram. At this time, Dongfang Chen also felt that it was difficult to get off. Before the battle, he had more than once said that he would trample on Gu Fei, but now, it seemed too unrealistic. Gu Fei's strength had far exceeded Dongfang Chen's expectations. Is there something strange about his left hand? Dongfang Chen was shocked that Gu Fei dared to use his flesh and blood to grab the Golden Moon chakram. He knew that Gu Fei was not afraid of the Golden Moon chakram. In this way, the advantage of a magic treasure was no longer an advantage. After taking back the Golden Moon chakram, Dongfang Chen and Gu Fei confronted each other. Neither of them dared to make a move rashly. Both of them were thinking about how to defeat each other. Among the thousands of disciples of the Supreme Mystery Sect present, except for the Supreme Mystery Sect's Taoist Xintian, no one knew that Gu Fei had already integrated the short purple rod passed down from the Jade Spirit Peak into his body. The magical power of refining the body could fuse a divine weapon into the flesh and blood of the body, allowing a certain part of the body to have the characteristics of a divine weapon. Although the short purple rod looked ordinary, it was exceptionally hard. No divine weapon or Taoist magic treasure could damage it in the slightest. Gu Fei relied on this characteristic of the short rod that had fused with his body to dare to grab the Biyun Peak's killing weapon, the Golden Moon Wheel, with his bare hands. Chapter 45. The golden moon shines in the sky, illuminates the world, open. Dongfang Chen's face was gloomy. His hands separated, and the spiritual power in his body surged out, pouring into the bright golden moon in front of him. Buzz! The golden moon wheel suspended in front of Dongfang Chen suddenly made a long sound. At the same time, a wave of ripples visible to the naked eye spread out from the golden moon wheel. Then the golden light shone brightly, and the golden moon wheel shook repeatedly. 1 turned into 2, 2 turned into 4. In the dazzling golden light, thousands of golden moons appeared, and the arena suddenly erupted with a dazzling golden light that no one dared to look directly at. A gust of strong metal wind swept out from the arena, causing the disciples of the 9 branches to feel a sharp pain in their faces. The disciples of the 9 branches who were watching the fight around the arena were shocked and hurriedly retreated. Gu Fei's heart trembled. The golden moon wheel, under Dongfang Qin's Taoist techniques, transformed into thousands of copies, and Dongfang Qin's figure was immediately submerged by the golden moons. Thousands of golden moons fluttered in the air above the arena, forming a marvelous scene. Wave after wave of surging and surging waves of magical power rippled out from the arena, causing the hearts of the disciples of the younger generation who were watching the battle in the surroundings of the 9th arena to palpitate. No one doubted the strength of Dongfang Qin. With the cultivation he showed, the disciples of the younger generation of the 9 lineages of Taishan sect, except for a limited number of people, were ashamed of their inferiority. Eldest brother, it seems that Gu Fei is in trouble. The golden moon wheel of Biyun Peak is not so easy to deal with. Ziyu, who was watching the battle in the distance, said to Li Lingfeng with a smile. As the eldest brother of the head of Taishan Peak, Li Lingfeng's knowledge was also beyond that of his peers. He looked at the 9th arena, touched his chin, and said, Dongfang Qin's strength is amazing. I think he is likely to have broken into the 8th layer of heaven, but that Gu Fei is not easy to deal with. Let's wait and see. The outcome will be revealed soon. Gu Fei, it's still not too late for you to admit defeat now. If I launch an attack, your life will be in danger. At that time, don't blame me for not reminding you. An awe-inspiring voice sounded from the heavy golden moon, filled with confidence. Thousands of golden moons danced around Dongfang Qin's body, and the power of the metal element had been pushed to the peak by Dongfang Qin. Waves of sharp, blade-like metal wind surged out, attacking the arena with a misty blue light. If it were not for the fact that an expert had set up a defensive formation around the 9th challenge ring to ensure that it would not be destroyed by the power of the Dao techniques unleashed by the contestants, the 9th challenge ring would have long been sliced into thousands of pieces by the sharp metal winds of the golden moons. Li. The metal wind surged, and the power of the metal element was like a blade. The clothes on Gu Fei's body were torn one after another, as if they were really cut by a sharp blade, revealing the bronze skin under the clothes. He stared at the thousands of spinning golden moons in front of him. He was shocked to find that he couldn't tell which golden moon was the real one. It was as if these thousands of golden moons were all real golden moons. It's not an illusion? How is this possible? Gu Fei didn't listen to Dongfang Qin's words at all. In his mind, he was thinking about how to break this golden moon wheel. As long as this treasure of Biyun Peak was broken, Dongfang Qin would become a toothless beast, and Gu Fei would have 60 to 70% confidence in defeating Dongfang Qin. However, it seemed that these thousands of golden moons were real tangible objects. The metal wind emitted from the golden moon was like a sharp blade. Although it was much more powerful than ordinary weapons, for Gu Fei, unless he was cut by the real golden moon, it was absolutely difficult to hurt him. Gu Fei had refined all the meridians and bones in his body to the point of changing marrow and changing blood. His whole body's qi and blood could reach every part of his body. With a thought, essence qi spread throughout his body, as if he was wearing an invisible armor. The sharp blade of ordinary weapons could no longer cut his skin and flesh. Very well, since you are asking for trouble, then don't blame me. Dongfang Qin, who was hidden in the thousands of golden moons, saw that Gu Fei did not pay attention to him, so he said in a fierce voice, "Go." Without any hesitation, before his voice fell, Dongfang Qin released a huge amount of spiritual power and integrated it into the golden moons that were hovering around him. Then, the thousands of golden moons around him immediately rushed up and surrounded Gu Fei in front of him. Whoosh whoosh. The metal wind surged, and thousands of golden moons covered the sky and the earth. From the sky to the ground, front to back, left to right, they blocked all of Gu Fei's escape routes. Seeing this scene, Zhao Ziru, who was below the stage, opened her cherry mouth in surprise, revealing her jade-like teeth. She nervously looked at the figure that was surrounded by the golden moons. Her palms were already sweating. Among the young disciples in my sect, Dongfang Qin's cultivation is the strongest. To be able to use this Dao technique with the golden moon, he is not simple. The Xin Fa Taoist looked at the competition below with a smile. The power of the golden moon was, of course, far more than this. However, Dongfang Qian was limited by his own cultivation, so he could only use 20 to 30% of the power of this sect treasure. After Dongfang Qian released this attack, he felt a burst of exhaustion. The golden moon wheel almost sucked all the Fa in his body. The more powerful the magic treasure, the more spiritual power it consumed. This was proportional, and Gu Fei, who was surrounded by thousands of golden moons, was in a difficult situation. The arena was only so big. Thousands of golden moons covered the entire arena, blocking everything. It was difficult for Gu Fei to dodge, and he could not dodge. Swoosh, swoosh. Like a sharp blade cutting through the void, the golden blades of light shot towards Gu Fei like countless crescent moons. The metal wind that surged from all directions was like a heavenly blade, chopping his body, causing him to feel bursts of pain. The places that were swept by the metal wind were burning. Although they did not cut his flesh, it was still difficult for Gu Fei to endure. Roar. In the face of danger, Gu Fei looked up to the sky and roared. His black hair suddenly danced wildly and stood up. A majestic force surged out from his body, and a ball of purple light instantly enveloped him. It was as if he was wearing a bright purple armor from head to toe. Extreme weapon refinement skill. Gu Fei had no choice. At the moment when the golden moons with the terrifying power of metal slashed at him, Gu Fei used the short stick that had been smelted into his body and turned it into a purple airflow in his blood and qi to cover his whole body, protecting his whole body. At this time, Gu Fei was equivalent to the incarnation of the short stick, and his whole body emitted a shocking sword qi. Boom, boom, boom. The thousands of golden moons that were flying toward him from all directions collided with his body, causing a series of loud noises. The spectating disciples of the 9 branches exclaimed one after another. To these people, using flesh and blood to fight a magic treasure was undoubtedly an extremely crazy move. Everyone broke out in a cold sweat for Gu Fei. Boom. The entire arena suddenly began to shake, and a violent force burst out like a raging sea wave, followed by a boom. Under the inexplicable gaze of the spectating disciples, a purple figure broke through the layers of golden moons, shattered thousands of golden moons, and rushed out of the encirclement. How is this possible? Seeing this scene, Dongfang Qin's eyes were wide open, and his face was full of disbelief. Although he was shocked, his reaction was extremely fast. When Gu Fei rushed out of the encirclement of the golden moons, he made a Taoist incantation gesture and pointed at Gu Fei. Swish. The magic treasure golden moons transformed into thousands of crescent light blades in an instant, turned into a golden moon that illuminated the world, and slashed at Gu Fei's chest. Humph! With a cold snort, Gu Fei took a step forward and threw a punch out. His fist, which was shrouded in purple qi, streaked across the sky like a meteor and collided with the golden moon that was flying over. Boom! An earth-shattering sound rang out, and the surging power shook the world. Even though it was daytime, the 2 terrifying powers violently collided, and the dazzling light that erupted from them illuminated the entire arena. The vast and mighty aftershocks caused the arena to shake violently, as if it could collapse at any time. The golden moon was directly smashed away by Gu Fei's punch, and Dongfang Qian immediately suffered a great impact. He spat out a mouthful of blood, staggered a few steps, and almost sat down on the arena. Chapter 46. You want to humiliate me in the arena? Then you have to be prepared to be abused. Gu Fei's body was covered in purple flames, and the murderous aura that surged out of his body made people's hearts palpitate. He grabbed Dongfang Qin's neck with one hand and lifted him up. His long hair fluttered without any wind, and his eyes shot out 2 blade-like sharp eyes, shining on Dongfang Qin's face. There was no expression on his face. Just now, the thousands of crescent-shaped golden blades slashed on Gu Fei's body. Although they did not cut his flesh, his clothes had been cut into pieces and hung on his body. Cough. Dongfang Qin's handsome face immediately turned purple. He was not willing to be defeated like this. With a thought, All the remaining spiritual power in his body rushed to the index and middle fingers of his right hand, and a golden light immediately gushed out from his fingertips. Qi. Dongfang Qin's fingers were like a sword, and the golden light burst out from his fingers, breaking through the void, and fiercely pierced towards Gu Fei's throat. Humph! Gu Fei did not dodge. He looked at Dongfang Qin with disdain in his eyes. Dongfang Qin's right index and middle fingers pierced Gu Fei's throat like lightning. But at the moment when he pierced Gu Fei's throat, Dongfang Qin felt that his finger was like piercing a piece of hard iron. With a light kacha, the finger bone was immediately broken by the force of the shock. Gu Fei, who fully displayed the weapon refining technique, was covered with the essence of the short stick that was smelted into his body. He had the characteristics of a short stick. Even the golden moon wheel of the Biyun Peak couldn't cut Gu Fei's skin and flesh, let alone a mere sword finger. Do you admit defeat? Do you lower your head? Gu Fei would never be soft-hearted to those who looked for trouble with him. Even on the arena, he wanted Dongfang Qin to lower his head and admit defeat in front of him. Bah! Dongfang Qin opened his mouth and spat a mouthful of saliva mixed with blood at Gu Fei. The spittle that flew towards Gu Fei couldn't even get close to Gu Fei's body. The purple aura around his body shook the spittle away. Very good. Gu Fei suddenly smiled, and then punched Dongfang Qin's lower abdomen. The golden armor that Dongfang Qin was wearing was immediately smashed by the powerful fist force, and a faint fist mark appeared where the fist hit. Wow! Another mouthful of blood spurted out. Dongfang Qin's face was extremely distorted. Obviously, this punch had a great impact on him. It shook his internal organs and made him even more injured. When the disciples below the stage saw how Gu Fei treated Dongfang Qin, they couldn't help but be surprised. At the same time, they were shocked. This Gu Fei was throwing away the face of the Biyun Peak. He was really bold. The Supreme Mystery sect leader, Taoist Xin Tian, who was sitting on the steps in front of the Supreme Mystery Hall, as well as the other heads of the 7 branches, all frowned. Gu Fei's behavior seemed a bit excessive, especially the Taoist of the Biyun Peak. At this time, his face had already darkened. His face was so gloomy that it seemed like it was about to drip water. The most outstanding young expert of the Biyun Peak was actually humiliated like this by his opponent. The entire Biyun Peak could not help but be furious. Stop! The disciples of the Biyun Peak who were watching the battle immediately shouted. Some of them even directly walked up to the bottom of the stage, as if they wanted to make a move. Where it is possible to forgive people, one should forgive people. Gu Fei, don't go too far. Below the stage, Dongfang Qin's master, Taoist Danyang, said fiercely. He looked at Gu Fei with eyes that seemed like they were about to spit fire. At this time, the Biyun Peak's treasure, the golden moon wheel, that was sent flying by Gu Fei's punch, had already been used by Taoist Danyang to retrieve it. This is the stage. If Dongfang Qin does not admit defeat, then I will beat him until he does. Gu Fei did not give any face to Taoist Danyang. He continued to hold Dongfang Qin's neck like he was holding a rooster waiting to be slaughtered. He waved his left fist and repeatedly greeted Dongfang Qin's body, bombarding the armor on Dongfang Qin's body with golden light. This Gu Fei is too arrogant, Li Lingfeng said with a frown. Offending the Biyun Peak did not benefit Gu Fei at all. Instead, he made a lot of enemies. The Dongfang clan would definitely not let this matter go after he taught Dongfang Qin a lesson in front of so many fellow disciples. They would not dare to do anything to Gu Fei on the surface, but they would definitely not let Gu Fei off in secret. The Dongfang clan was not a weak force in the Tonglong continent's Qi country. If Gu Fei went down the mountain in the future, it was hard to say that the Dongfang clan would not take revenge on him. Do you admit defeat? Do you admit defeat? Gu Fei shouted again and again. At the same time, he punched Dongfang Qin's body again and again, causing Dongfang Qin to vomit blood. Taoist Danyang, who was below the stage, saw his disciple being beaten by Gu Fei until he vomited blood again and again. He was anxious to save his disciple, so he did not care about his face anymore. He shouted at Gu Fei on the stage, "We admit defeat. We admit defeat. Quickly stop." The disciples around the stage were all shocked to see this scene. This Gu Fei was really daring. He actually dared to treat the disciples of the Biyun Peak like this. As for the Biyun Peak disciples, their faces were filled with anger. Some of them even started cursing at Gu Fei. After hearing the words of Taoist Danyang, Gu Fei looked at Dongfang Chun, who was in his hand. He saw that although Dongfang Chun looked tired, he still held on and did not let himself faint. Dongfang Chun, count yourself lucky? Gu Fei lifted Dongfang Chun in front of him and whispered in Dongfang Chun's ear. Dongfang Chun panted heavily, and his whole body trembled. It was because he was angry. He was born in a cultivation family. It could be said that he had the wind and rain when he wanted it. Even if he lost to Lin Shuer of the Shangqing sect a year ago, it was far less humiliating than losing to Gu Fei. He was a proud person, a frivolous person. He was a disciple of an aristocratic family, a cultivation genius, and at such a young age, he had extraordinary strength. With such capital, how could Dongfang Chun not be frivolous? He was so ashamed that he wanted to die. In his heart, he already hated Gu Fei. He secretly clenched his teeth and made up his mind that in the future, he must teach Gu Fei a lesson. However, Gu Fei did not care so much. With the force of his right hand, he threw Dongfang Chun out of the ring. The bright purple light that was emitted from his body gradually faded, and then all of it was absorbed into his body. Taoist Danyang quickly jumped forward and hugged Dongfang Chun, who had fallen from the ring. He looked at Gu Fei, who was on the ring, and did not say a word. He turned around and walked away with Dongfang Chun in his arms. The battle between Gu Fei and Dongfang Chun was extremely shocking in the Supreme Mystery sect. The Chuiling Peak actually had a disciple like Gu Fei. His combat strength was amazing. He had defeated the outstanding disciple of the Shaoyang Peak, Li Hao, and the young master of the Biyun Peak, Dongfang Chun, and advanced to the second round of the competition with 2 complete victories. It seemed that among the top 10 young masters of the 9 Peaks tournament, Gu Fei had already occupied one of them. Dongfang Chun, who was second only to the eldest disciple of the Supreme Mystery sect, Li Lingfeng, had been defeated. Among the younger generation of the 9 Peaks tournament, perhaps only the eldest disciple, Li Lingfeng, could fight with Gu Fei. While everyone was talking in low voices, Gu Fei jumped down from the ring. Wherever he passed, the disciples made way for him. All the young disciples had a sense of awe for Gu Fei. At this time, Gu Fei was not feeling well either. He had not used the weapon-refining body refining technique perfectly. Under the desperate display of the technique just now, the flesh and bones in his body had been injured by the essence of the short stick in his body. If one looked closely, they could see that the pores on Gu Fei's body were oozing with blood. Gu Fei went straight to a big tree outside the square and sat cross-legged. He mobilized the exuberant essence in his body, shook his muscles, bones, and flesh, and repaired the damaged parts. Zhao Ziru saw that Gu Fei had won and wanted to congratulate him, but when she saw Gu Fei sitting cross-legged under the big tree like an old monk, she retracted her foot that had stepped out. Gu Fei was recovering his Yuan Qi, but it was not suitable for Zhao Ziru to disturb Gu Fei at this time. After closing his eyes, everything in the outside world seemed to have nothing to do with Gu Fei. The sounds in the square were all excluded from his ears, and he was unmoved. My heart is one, immersed in the path of cultivation, not disturbed by external things. This is Gu Fei's way of cultivation. What I think in my heart, I will put it into action, and I will maintain a pure heart. Chapter 47. Although the weapon refinement technique allowed Gu Fei to possess an abnormally strong body that could withstand the Biyun Peak's treasure, the Golden Moon Wheel, for a short period of time, this state of spreading a certain characteristic of the divine weapon into his body could not be maintained for long. Moreover, the strange essence of the magic weapon had not completely dissolved in the body's qi and blood. If he desperately stimulated the power of the magic weapon, his body would inevitably not be able to bear it. Gu Fei was now suffering from the side effects of overexerting the magical power of weapon refining body. Every inch of his body felt as if it was being pricked by sharp needles. Just sitting under the tree for a while, his tattered clothes were soaked with sweat, and the sweat, with a bloody smell, dyed the tattered clothes on his body dark black. It was the clotted blood that was forced out of the body. All of Gu Fei's flesh and bones trembled slightly. His body vaguely emitted the rumbling sound of heavenly drums. The vigorous qi and blood in his body washed through his body, and the pain of being pricked by thousands of needles gradually subsided. The body-refining technique and martial arts cultivation method made Gu Fei's body strong enough to be comparable to ordinary magic weapons of cultivators, and his recovery ability was also amazing. Waves of qi and blood containing the original essence of the 5 elements washed through his body, and the wounds in his flesh and blood were healing rapidly. Well, the path of martial arts is a path of the strong derived from fighting, progress in life and death battles, and move forward by stepping on the corpses of the opponents. Gu Fei felt that after the fierce battle with Dongfang Chun, his strength seemed to have made some progress. Life and death battles were conducive to the breakthrough of his cultivation base. This was Gu Fei's realization after the battle. It seemed that the predecessors had taken the wrong path. His master, Wan Xiancheng, did not easily step out of the Green Spirit Peak. He always immersed himself in cultivation in the mountains. Little did he know that this ancient body-refining technique was a killing technique created for battle. A strong body corresponded to unparalleled combat power. There was a limit to progress by immersing oneself in cultivation. Life and death battles were a shortcut. To comprehend in battle and sublimate in battle was a completely different path from the quiet and inaction of Tao techniques. Cultivators focused on meditation, moving the spiritual energy of heaven and earth, nourishing the primordial spirit body, and condensing magical power. But the path of martial arts focused on movement, refining the tendons, bones, flesh, and blood of the whole body, and producing the original power from the qi and blood. Therefore, too much meditation would restrict the breakthrough of one's cultivation base. The profound magic Taoist expressionlessly walked out and announced that the second round of the trials would begin the next day. Soon after, a list was posted. It was the name list of those who advanced to the second round of the trials. When the profound magic Taoist announced the end of the trials for the day, Gu Fei, who was sitting cross-legged under a tree at the side of the square, opened his eyes. With a thought, the golden light on his body flickered and disappeared. Then, the tattered, dark black clothes on his upper body were torn to shreds and fell to the ground, revealing his bronze-colored, robust body. Gu Fei's shirt was in tatters, and he was only wearing a pair of trousers that were also tattered and full of holes. However, the trousers on the important parts of his body were still relatively intact, so he would definitely not be exposed. Gu Fei stood up and immediately heard light footsteps coming from the side. He turned his head and saw a girl in a white dress walking over gracefully. In the night, she seemed to be stepping on a cloud as she floated over. Her beautiful appearance, long hair that burst out like a burst, and her muscles that were as cold as ice, as if she was a fairy that had descended from the heavens to the mortal world. Junior sister Zhao? Gu Fei was startled. His eyes looked at the girl's face, and some kind of emotion seemed to rise in his heart. This was a strange feeling that he had never felt before. This feeling made Gu Fei's heart beat faster and his blood flow faster. Zhao Ziru was as light as a swallow as she arrived in front of Gu Fei. Congratulations to senior brother Gu for showing your strength and defeating Dongfang Chun. Haha, it's really unexpected. The shock caused by Gu Fei defeating Dongfang Chun was unparalleled among the younger generation of disciples. The disciples of the Green Spirit Peak gave people the impression that their cultivation was low, but their skin was thick and they could take a beating. But today, the combat power that Gu Fei had displayed was shocking. Pure martial skills were very terrifying. Even the disciples of the older generation were amazed. Wan Xiancheng, the disciple of the previous generation of the Green Spirit Peak, who had passed away, usually stayed in his cave in the Green Spirit Peak and would not easily show his combat skills in front of others. Therefore, even the disciples of the generation of Wan Xiancheng, very few people knew how powerful the combat skills of the Green Spirit Peak were. And Gu Fei's performance today undoubtedly shocked them, and also gave birth to some uneasiness. They were afraid that in the future, the Supreme Mystery Sect would no longer be peaceful. Humph! If Dongfang Chun didn't have the golden moon wheel of the Biyun Peak, he would have lost even more miserably. Gu Fei said with some disdain. Defeating Dongfang Chun was actually not a great thing. The disciples of the Green Spirit Peak were originally stronger than the disciples of the other 8 branches of the same realm. Even if they faced a disciple whose cultivation was 1 layer higher than them, they could still compete with them. Moreover, this situation was not so obvious in the realms below the 5th layer. After surpassing the 5th layer, the advantage of a martial artist would appear among other cultivators of the same realm. Gu Fei's master, Wan Xianqing, who had passed away, had once used the cultivation of the 9th layer to force back a cultivator of the transcending mortality stage. And now, Gu Fei had cultivated the magical ability of transforming his body into a weapon. His combat power would be even more amazing, and it was no longer impossible for him to challenge someone of a higher level. Senior Brother Gu, you must not be careless. With Dongfang Qin's cultivation, he could only display 10 to 20% of the power of the Golden Moon Wheel. Zhao Ziru said, the Golden Moon Wheel, being able to become a treasure of the Biyun Peak, its power was certainly not limited to this. However, with Dongfang Qin's cultivation, being able to drive the Golden Moon Wheel to display the Dao technique of the Moon Shadow Division was already the limit of what he could bear. Gu Fei nodded. He knew that if he hadn't cultivated the magical ability of transforming his body into a weapon and smelted the short stick that seemed to be a sword hilt passed down by his master into his body, the outcome of today's battle with Dongfang Qin would have been rewritten. The sharpness of the metal element magic treasure, the Golden Moon Wheel, was definitely not inferior to the sharpness of a divine weapon. It was not surprising that the circle of sharp blades could cut hair, cut stone, and split gold. Ordinary swords, ordinary magic treasures, Gu Fei could directly resist them with his body, but he would never be able to withstand the slash of the Golden Moon Wheel. With the power of the Golden Moon Wheel, even a real person made of iron would be split in half. Unless Gu Fei could cultivate this ancient body refining technique to the great accomplishment realm, his body would be able to ignore the attacks of any divine weapon or magic treasure. Senior Brother Gu, let's go take a look at the list posted, Zhao Ziru said. All right. Gu Fei's words were very direct and very straightforward. He seemed to never be sloppy. He always maintained his original heart and did what he wanted to do. When Gu Fei and Zhao Ziru walked towards the steps in front of the square, a pair of vicious and fierce eyes were staring at the two of them under the tree opposite the square. Gu Fei. Under the tree, the man's face was gloomy. He gritted his teeth, and these 2 weak and almost inaudible sounds came out of his mouth. At this time, a white-robed disciple walked towards the man who was full of resentment towards Gu Fei. Junior Brother Wang, so you are here. Eldest senior brother invites you to come over. Why does Li Lingfeng want to find me? The man frowned. A trace of surprise flashed in his eyes, and then said to the white-robed disciple, please lead the way, senior brother. In the Supreme Profound sect, the only person who had enmity with Gu Fei was Wang Yuanji, and the person who wanted nothing more than to cut Gu Fei into 8 pieces was Wang Yi. The white-robed disciple was a member of the sect leader's faction, so Wang Yuanji did not dare to be negligent. He immediately changed his expression and followed behind the white-robed disciple, heading towards the back peak of the Supreme Profound Peak. Wang Yuanji originally wanted to use Dongfang Qin's hand to humiliate Gu Fei, but unfortunately, Dongfang Qin was not a match for Gu Fei, and was instead humiliated by Gu Fei. After this battle, Dongfang Qin had no face left, and even the disciples of the Biyun Peak felt ashamed. In this way, the new hatred and old hatred added together, causing Wang Yuanji to want to go crazy. He hated Gu Fei to the point that his teeth itched, but he could not do anything to Gu Fei. This kind of feeling of not being able to vent his anger almost made Wang Yuanji, a narrow-minded disciple of an aristocratic family, go crazy. However, so what? The demons could only blame themselves for not being strong enough. They could only break their teeth and swallow the blood into their stomachs. At this time, the people in the square had gradually dispersed. Those who had advanced to the second round of the competition tomorrow had already returned to their respective cultivation grounds to recuperate their qi and restore their mana and physical strength in preparation for tomorrow's competition. As for those who had been eliminated, they sighed dejectedly. On the contrary, they were still discussing today's competition with others, looking at the list that had been posted, or simply walking to the side in a daze. Chapter 48. Gu Fei raised his eyes and looked at the yellow paper on the wall next to the square. He glanced at it and said, In the first round of the competition, 39 people were eliminated, which is equivalent to eliminating half of them. Out of the 2 rounds of the competition, only 1 victory would allow them to advance to the second round. Yet, half of them had been eliminated. This had more or less exceeded Gu Fei's expectations. The number of people who advanced to the second round of the competition is the highest. Zhao Ziru also looked at the list of people who had successfully advanced and said, she did not seem too surprised. The disciples of the Taishan Peak were the disciples of the sect leader. The outstanding disciples of the sect leader were, of course, more than the other 8 branches. The eldest senior brother, Li Lingfeng, was recognized as the number 1 person in the younger generation. It was said that his cultivation was not far from the bottleneck of condensing the Dao core. Li Lingfeng is a good opponent. Gu Fei looked at the first name on the list and said indifferently. As soon as he said this, not only Zhao Ziru, but the disciples next to him were also shocked. Gu Fei actually regarded Li Lingfeng as an opponent. However, when they thought of the strength that Gu Fei had displayed today, they were relieved. This disciple of the Green Spirit Peak was no longer the same as before. He was no longer the loser whose cultivation was the last among the younger generation of disciples of the Taishan sect. With the strength that Gu Fei had defeated Dongfang Chun, he was qualified enough to challenge Li Lingfeng and even compete for the throne of the first among the younger generation of disciples. After looking at the list, Gu Fei and Zhao Ziru walked out of the square under the gaze of the crowd. Outside the square, after Gu Fei and Zhao Ziru parted, they directly went down the Taishan Peak and went straight to the Green Spirit Peak. Tomorrow, it would be a tough battle. Although today, they had the feeling of being in the limelight, but at the same time, they had also offended many people. Strength. As long as they had enough strength, they did not need to be afraid of anyone. Gu Fei wanted to become stronger, but on the path of cultivation, one couldn't become a peerless expert overnight. Aside from hard work, one also needed to be talented in cultivation. Today's battle with Dongfang Chun gave Gu Fei some insights, so he planned to use one night to digest today's insights. Although it was only one night, if he could comprehend it, he might be able to break through his current realm and take another step forward in his cultivation. Just as Gu Fei descended Taishan Peak and headed for Chuiling Peak, a person came out of a wooden house in the plum forest behind Taishan Peak. At this time, the sun had disappeared under the mountains, and there were still a few red clouds floating in the western sky that seemed to be on fire. In the plum forest behind Taishan Peak, there was already a trace of mist, and it seemed a little dim. After this person came out of the wooden house, he seemed to be impatient to leave this place. He walked briskly along a small path in front of the wooden house and headed out of the forest. The plum forest was not big, only about 10 acres. The man quickly walked out of the plum forest along the small path. He actually told me not to find trouble with that Gu Fei? This is outrageous. After leaving the plum forest, the man suddenly stopped, looked back at the wooden house in the forest, and muttered with hatred. The dim light shone on the man's face. This man was Wang Yuanji, who had been invited by Li Lingfeng. At this time, Wang Yuanji had a cold look on his face. He turned around and continued to walk forward. After leaving the plum forest, there was a gravel path that led straight to the front of Taishan Peak. When Wang Yuanji's figure disappeared on the path, the wooden door of the wooden house in the plum forest was pushed open from the inside, and a young man in white came out. This was an ordinary young man. He had no handsome face, no tall figure, no white skin. He was very ordinary, so ordinary that if he stood in the crowd, he would never attract the attention of others. But it was this young man, who was neither handsome nor tall and powerful, and whose skin was even a bit like that of a farmer, who was the eldest senior of the younger generation of the Taishan sect. Li Lingfeng, an ordinary young man, was known as a cultivation genius. He was the #1 expert of the younger generation of the Taishan sect. Although his appearance was not outstanding, no one dared to look down on him. I hope that Wang Yuanji can be vigilant. Otherwise, if he goes to find trouble with that Gu Fei, his life may be in danger. Li Lingfeng looked in the direction where Wang Yuanji disappeared inside. A person like Gu Fei is only dedicated to advancing bravely on the path of cultivation, but he is arrogant and does not leave any leeway, without the slightest restraint or restraint. Today, when he dealt with Dongfang Qian in the arena, I know that he is a decisive person. If Wang Yuanji really doesn't know what's good for him and provokes him again, I'm afraid there will be big trouble. A person like Li Lingfeng, of course, would not wholeheartedly cultivate in the plum forest in the back of the mountain. As a disciple of the head of the sect, the eldest senior of the disciples of the 9 veins of supreme mystery, things that he should know absolutely could not escape his eyes, and things that he should not know, he was too lazy to pay attention to. Li Lingfeng shook his head and sighed, then turned and walked into the wooden house, closing the wooden door. There was no light inside, and there was no light. The plum forest was silent, and no sound came out. Gu Fei, who had come down from Taishan Peak, ran more than 100 miles on the rugged mountain road in one breath, returning to the bamboo forest at the foot of Green Spirit Peak. My own place is still the best. Gu Fei took a deep breath, and the faint fragrance of bamboo floated into his nose, making him feel refreshed. Just as Gu Fei was about to enter the bamboo forest, he suddenly felt a chill on his body before he could even step down with his right foot. Then, all the hair on his body instantly stood on end. His entire body was filled with alarm, as if he was being stared at by a terrifying, ferocious beast in the dark. Not good. Gu Fei was shocked, and all the muscles and bones in his body immediately trembled. His joints and bones immediately erupted with a burst of dense thunder, and as his flesh and bones vibrated, a huge wave of yuan qi immediately burst out. The wave passed through his body, violently shook the air, and a strong wind immediately swept in all directions. The bamboo leaves on the ground with a tongue sound were stirred up into the sky, and pieces of bamboo leaves danced in the air. All of this happened in an instant, and at this time, countless dark green bamboos were reflected in Gu Fei's eyes. Without a sound, the bamboo that had been sharpened shot out from the bamboo forest and quickly streaked across the air, but did not make a single sound. It was extremely strange. Hey! Gu Fei's right foot, which had not yet stepped down, suddenly stomped down. Pung! His whole body left an afterimage as he rapidly retreated. However, Gu Fei had underestimated the speed of the countless sharp bamboo that shot out from the bamboo forest. The bamboo seemed to give people an illusion that they were slow, but in reality, they were unimaginably fast and definitely exceeded Gu Fei's expectations. Just as his body flew up, the dense bamboo in front of him, as if it had teleported, shot in front of him. Damn it! Gu Fei was greatly shocked, and he only had time to cover his eyes with his hands before feeling waves of piercing pain come from his body, as if countless sharp steel pillars had collided with his body. Moreover, every single bamboo contained a formidable force of impact, and it directly knocked Gu Fei over 30 m away. Gu Fei felt as if he'd been densely bombarded by countless 500 kilograms hammers, and his entire body was shaken by the innumerable bamboo that collided with his body to the point it seemed as if it was about to fall apart, and the tendons and bones on his body emitted waves of soreness. Bang! Gu Fei directly smashed into a small patch of forest behind him, and a large hole was instantly smashed open in that small patch of forest. Broken branches and shattered leaves fluttered in the air, and dust and dirt rose into the air. Meanwhile, a black figure slowly walked out from the bamboo forest. This was a man in black, a person covered from head to toe in tight black clothes. From his appearance, it was impossible to tell whether this person was male or female, old or young. This mysterious person's exposed eyes revealed an undisguised killing intent. Looking at this posture, he not only came for Gu Fei, but also wanted to kill Gu Fei. Pung! With a sound, Gu Fei shook off the soil on his body and rushed out of the pit. His entire body rushed out a misty, multicolored light, revealing a powerful and oppressive aura. The man was obviously taken aback. He seemed to be a little surprised. Under his attack, Gu Fei did not seem to be injured at all. Gu Fei was shocked. His eyes revealed a sharp light as he swept his gaze over the person in front of him. There was actually someone here to kill him. Was this person skilled and bold, or was his head kicked by a donkey? This was the territory of the Taishan sect. Was he not afraid of alarming the masters of the Taishan sect? The black-clothed man did not say anything. He coldly snorted, and then his hands formed a mysterious formula in front of his chest. A vast wave of spiritual power immediately spread out from the black-clothed man. Then, the mountain rocks that were scattered around the black-clothed man immediately flew up. At the same time, they emitted raging flames and turned into a group of meteors that flew towards Gu Fei from all directions. When Gu Fei saw this scene, his pupils could not help but shrink. This person's cultivation was really amazing. He was not an ordinary master. The flaming stone had not actually flown in front of him, but a terrifying heat wave had already hit Gu Fei's body. This heat was not simple. It made him feel as if he had fallen into a cave of fire. It continuously drilled into the 84,000 pores on his body, as if it wanted to ignite his body from the inside out. Gu Fei felt great danger from the black-clothed man. He did not dare to be negligent. His body immediately shrank. His entire body shrank to a height of about 3 feet, as if he had suddenly become a child. The black-clothed man was obviously shocked by the scene in front of him. There was a look of disbelief in his eyes. Whoosh! With a sound, Gu Fei, who had shrunk his body, leaned down to the ground at the same time. His feet fiercely pushed off the ground, and his entire body was like a spirit snake flying along the ground, rushing towards the black-clothed man. Boom boom! There was a huge tremor. The flaming stones that were rushing towards Gu Fei from all directions exploded at the moment when Gu Fei darted out. The terrifying heat that erupted from it burned the surrounding 10 feet into scorched earth. At this moment, Gu Fei had already arrived in front of the black-clothed man with the snake movement technique at lightning speed. Then, like a venomous snake, he twisted around the black-clothed man's body in an instant. With an incomparably fierce bear hug, he wanted to crush the black-clothed man's bones and crush his tendons to death. Gu Fei's attack was incomparably fierce. This bear hug was even more brutal and ferocious than the hug of the giant mountain bear. Chapter 49. Phantom Doppelganger? When Gu Fei extinguished the black figure, he was instantly shocked. This kind of doppelganger technique that was almost like a real person had already surpassed the scope of the Tao techniques that martial cultivators of the Awakening Self stage could use. This person is a martial cultivator of the Transcending Mortality stage. In an instant, Gu Fei was able to determine the cultivation level of this person. To him, a martial cultivator of the Transcending Mortality stage was simply too great of a threat. With his current cultivation level, it was absolutely impossible for him to fight against an expert of this level. In the blink of an eye, just as Gu Fei crushed the doppelganger with a bear hug, he instantly felt a bone-chilling murderous aura attack his body from behind, causing him to quiver and shiver. Then, a wave of magical power that was as vast as the ocean came from behind him. A flaming fist, with a terrifying heat that could melt gold and iron, cut through the void and smashed into his back in an instant. Pung! Gu Fei was directly smashed into the air by the extremely violent fist force. The moment he was smashed into the air, a large mouthful of blood involuntarily gushed out of Gu Fei's mouth and the blood splattered outside the bamboo forest. So strong. Is this the strength of a martial cultivator of the Transcending Mortality stage? Although Gu Fei had used the weapon refining body transformation technique at the critical moment, condensing the chi of the divine weapon transformed from the short purple rod in his body onto his back to block the mysterious person's fist, the power of the flame fist that the mysterious person had struck out was simply too strong. However, the mysterious man's raging flame fist was simply too powerful. Almost with a single punch, the divine weapon chi that he had refined into his body was blasted out of his body. The powerful shock immediately caused Gu Fei's internal organs to be impacted, causing him to suffer serious internal injuries. If he had not used the weapon refining body transformation technique and the divine weapon that he had melted into his body to block most of the impact, even if this punch could not kill Gu Fei, it would have at least taken half of his life. However, the mysterious person's attack did not stop there. When he sent Gu Fei flying, he appeared behind Gu Fei, as if he had walked out of the void, soundlessly. The black-robed man seemed to open his mouth at Gu Fei, and suddenly a thin line of fire shot out from his mouth through the black cloth that covered his face. Chi! There was a subtle sound of a sharp blade tearing through cloth. It swept towards Gu Fei, who had already been sent flying hundreds of feet away, and crashed into the bamboo forest. Fiery sword Chi? Suddenly, a startled cry rang out from afar. A silhouette flashed as a person rushed over with the speed of the wind. Who was this person? At this time, a vast wave of Fali came from the top of Taishan Peak, like a monstrous wave, surging through the mountains. The next moment, a purple figure appeared in the sky above the bamboo forest below Green Spirit Peak. A purple-robed old Taoist stood in the void, exuding a majestic aura from all over his body. At this moment, the aura of a powerhouse who looked down on the world was fully displayed. Greetings to the head of the sect. The white-robed young man outside the bamboo forest immediately bowed when he saw the old Taoist. Ziyu, what the hell is going on? The person who came was the head of the Taishan sect, Taoist Xintian. He looked around and immediately noticed the Fali that had yet to dissipate. Taoist Xuantian's expression could not help but change. With Taoist Xuantian's terrifying cultivation base at the 9th heavenly layer of Imperial Void, his Yuan spirit could cover a distance of 100 miles in an instant. But even with such speed, the black-clothed man still managed to escape. As Xuantian's proud person spoke, he pressed his right palm downwards and a figure floated up from the depths of the bamboo forest. It was as if there was an invisible rope pulling it towards Taoist Xintian. The person who rose up from the depths of the bamboo forest was Gu Fei. At this time, Gu Fei had already fainted. His body was covered in blood, and he looked extremely miserable. However, there was still a trace of his breath left. Reporting to the head of the sect, someone just tried to kill Brother Gu Fei. They wanted to kill Brother Gu Fei. The handsome young man, Ziyu, quickly replied respectfully. At this time, Taoist Xintian had already caught Gu Fei. He looked down and saw that Gu Fei's eyes were closed. His face was filled with pain, and there was a circle of wounds on his neck. The flesh on the wound was twisted, and blood was seeping out. Taoist Xintian was shocked and quickly looked closely. Fortunately, it was only a layer of flesh. The muscles, meridians, and blood vessels inside were not injured. Who the hell is it? Taoist Xintian, who rarely got angry, couldn't help but feel anger rise in his chest. His eyes shone several feet away. Swish, swish, swish. At this time, figures swayed in the air above the bamboo forest. One after another, 7 purple-robed old Taoists appeared. They had sensed the terrible Fali that had just exploded on Taishan Peak, so they had rushed over to see what had happened. Senior brother, the head of the 7 branches who had rushed over were shocked by what he saw. The bamboo forest was a mess, and Taoist Xintian was holding an unconscious Gu Fei. These 7 old Taoists had lived for hundreds of years. They had a wide range of knowledge, and their thoughts were meticulous. It was difficult for others to compare. They could be called old monsters. With a glance, how could they not know what had happened? How dare someone attack our disciple in our territory? How can we let this go? Purple Bamboo Peak's head, Long Hongxue, said fiercely. That person had dared to attack Gu Fei in the Taishan sect. This was no different from slapping the Taishan sect in the face. The 7 heads were already angry. Ziyu, described that person's characteristics to the other martial granduncles. Taoist Xuantian's voice came down from the sky. Although his tone was calm, others could still hear a trace of gunpowder in it. Yes, head of the sect. Ziyu hurriedly bowed to the head of the 7 branches, who was standing in the sky, and then told them the characteristics of the black-clothed person. What? After a while, the heads of the 7 branches and Taoist Xintian were both shocked after listening to Ziyu's story. The identity of that mysterious person seemed to be, senior brother. Could it really be someone from the Guangqing Celestial sect? Taoist Xuanfa's tone was a little hesitant. He was not sure, because if this matter involved the Guangqing Celestial sect, it would be very troublesome. Someone who can cultivate the fiery sword Qi is not necessarily someone from the Guangqing Celestial sect. In this world, it is not only the Guangqing Celestial sect that cultivates the sword celestial technique. Taoist Xintian said after thinking for a while. A scroll that has sealed the power of a Tao technique, and it is a Tao technique that moves the universe and changes space. This kind of high-level Tao technique scroll is rare. Since the mysterious person who tried to kill Gu Fei dared to use the sword celestial technique, released the fiery sword Qi, and then used the Tao technique scroll to escape, it was obvious that he was not afraid of the Taishan sect. No one knew if this mysterious person was deliberately trying to mislead them, or if he was plotting something. This matter needs to be discussed at length. We cannot be careless. If we do not handle it properly, it will cause a misunderstanding between us and the Guangqing celestial sect. The consequences will be unimaginable. Taoist Xuanzong frowned. Junior brothers, there is no point in guessing here. You should go back first. Since that person was able to escape with a law technique scroll with the power of the law technique sealed in it, I'm afraid he has already planned everything. It is difficult for us to make any progress in this matter at the moment. I should take Gu Fei back to Taishan Peak and heal his injuries first. Taoist Xintian thought for a while and finally said this. Since that mysterious person had used a Tao technique scroll to escape, then it was absolutely impossible to catch up to him, nor was there any way to pursue him, because no one knew which direction he had fled in. The 7 leaders bid farewell to Taoist Xintian and flew back to their own caves. But the medicine Taoist, the head of Spirit Bead Peak, was stopped by Taoist Xintian. Senior brother, is there something else? The medicine Taoist seemed surprised that his senior brother had stopped him. In fact, he was faking it. As expected, Taoist Xintian smiled. Junior brother medicine, do you really not know why I stopped you? Taoist Xintian looked at the medicine Taoist meaningfully. If I had known, I would not have come here. The medicine Taoist helplessly patted the cosmos bag on his waist. A red gourd flew out of the bag and landed in the medicine Taoist's hand. The medicine Taoist painfully pulled out the stopper of the gourd. A faint fragrance immediately floated out from the gourd. This fragrance made one feel refreshed and comfortable. Chapter 50. One of the 9 branches of the Taishan sect, the Spirit Bead Peak, was in charge of the immortal herb garden. It was the branch of the Taishan sect that was proficient in the way of alchemy. The amount of effort and energy required to start a cauldron was unimaginable. Most cultivators were not willing to spend too much time and energy on alchemy. This was because alchemy, in addition to expending a lot of effort and energy, it also required raw materials. Often, a cauldron of pills would require dozens or even hundreds of different kinds of spiritual herbs. The reason why spiritual herbs were called spiritual herbs was because they were rare. After all, these spiritual herbs were not like carrots. After 2 or 3 months, they would grow into a large field. The more precious a pill was, the rarer and more difficult it was to find the spiritual herbs needed. Often, when an alchemy master prepared to start a cauldron of pills, just collecting the spiritual herbs would take years, even decades, or even decades. The golden pill that the medicine Taoist poured out from the red gourd was the famous golden pill of 9 revolutions in the world of cultivation. To refine a cauldron of 9 transformations golden pills, just the preparation time alone would take up to 10 years. The number of spiritual herbs needed to be collected was as many as hundreds of types, and some of the spiritual herbs could even be called the spiritual essence of the world. Moreover, even if a cauldron of pills was successfully refined, it would be pitifully small. At most, there would be 7 or 8 pills. At the very least, there would only be 1 golden pill of 9 revolutions. The golden pill of 9 revolutions could restore flesh and bones from the dead. No matter how serious the injury, as long as one was still breathing, they would not die after taking the golden pill of 9 revolutions. For a cultivator, this was undoubtedly an extra life. With Gu Fei's current injury, if he did not take the golden pill of 9 revolutions, he would need to lie in bed for at least 10 days to gradually recover. However, the competition tomorrow would require Gu Fei's participation. Therefore, Taoist Xintian asked the medicine Taoist for a golden pill of 9 revolutions. Senior, I still have things to do. I will leave first. After the medicine Taoist put away the red gourd, he hurriedly bowed to Taoist Xintian and turned into a ray of light, as if he was escaping. Ziyu, come with me. Taoist Xintian put away the golden elixir of 9 transformations and carried Gu Fei toward Taishan Peak. Ziyu, who was on the ground, felt his body tighten. Then, he could not help but rise into the air, following behind Taoist Xintian. They flew through the air towards the towering Taishan Peak. In a secret room at the back of the Supreme Profound Hall, there was a praying mat in the center. On the praying mat sat a naked youth, and opposite the youth sat an old Taoist. There were 2 other white-clothed youths standing respectfully behind the old Taoist. One of them was handsome like jade and had an elegant demeanor. He was a beautiful youth, but his body seemed a little weak. The other youth's appearance was very ordinary, just like a farmer youth in the countryside. A person's appearance often did not mean anything. Of these 2 youths, one was weak, the other ordinary, but their backgrounds were not small. They were the 2 most outstanding disciples of the sect leader's generation. The graceful and beautiful young man was Ziyu, whereas the young man with an unprepossessing appearance that seemed to have dark red skin from being exposed to the sun and rain in the countryside was the eldest senior brother of the sect master's line, Li Lingfeng. And the old Taoist priest in the secret room was the sect leader of Taishan sect, Taoist Xintian. The youth who sat cross-legged in the middle of the secret room with his eyes closed, his expression pained and his body naked, was Gu Fei, who had been injured by the mysterious person. On Gu Fei's back, there was a deep purple fist print that had sunk into Gu Fei's body. Blue veins spread out from the center of the fist print, protruding from the skin on Gu Fei's back. It was a shocking sight. Gu Fei, who had bones of steel, had been heavily injured by the mysterious person's punch, even though he had used the magical power of refining his body to protect his back. This was the difference in strength, the difference between the awakening realm and the transcending mortality realm. The mysterious person's cultivation was a whole realm higher than Gu Fei's. If it were not for the fact that Gu Fei cultivated in a body-refining technique that was famous for its strength, and that his body was much stronger than that of an ordinary martial cultivator, if it were not for the fact that Gu Fei had used the magical power of refining his body to counteract most of the power of the mysterious person's punch, Gu Fei would have really died under that person's fist. At this time, Gu Fei had already taken the golden elixir of 9 revolutions. The medicinal power of the golden elixir of 9 revolutions was extremely strong. Taoist Xintian sat in front of Gu Fei, his hands constantly forming seals, injecting magical power into Gu Fei's body, controlling and stimulating the medicinal power of the golden elixir of 9 revolutions, so that the effects of the golden elixir of 9 revolutions could be fully exerted. A huge amount of spiritual power surged through Gu Fei's body, and all his muscles, bones, and flesh were surging and trembling. Within his flesh and blood, not only was there a huge burst of spiritual power from the golden elixir of 9 revolutions, but there was also a trace of fire. It burned through Gu Fei's meridians, evaporated his blood, and burned his life. The medicinal power of the golden elixir of 9 revolutions was healing Gu Fei's injured body, but the threads of fire were like maggots in his bones, burning Gu Fei's flesh, bones, and tendons. The 2 extreme powers of regeneration and destruction were using Gu Fei's body as a battlefield. They collided with each other and canceled each other out. This made it hard for Gu Fei. Every inch of his skin felt like it was being pierced by thousands of small knives. It was like he was being tortured by 1,000 cuts. The golden elixir of 9 revolutions went through 9 revolutions. When the powerful spiritual power from the golden elixir of 9 revolutions in Gu Fei's body reached 7 revolutions, Gu Fei's body began to violently tremble. Then, strands of hair-thin flames seeped out of his pores. What a sinister method! Taoist Xintian formed a seal, carefully drawing out the spiritual power in Gu Fei's body. It was now a critical moment. The huge amount of spiritual power was gradually forcing out the flames in Gu Fei's body. Taoist Xintian never imagined that the person who had attacked Gu Fei had buried a fatal killing blow in Gu Fei's body. That mysterious person had actually injected the Taoist true fire into Gu Fei's body, causing the Taoist true fire to hide inside Gu Fei's body. At a certain time, it would explode from Gu Fei's body, burning him to ashes. Li Lingfeng and Ziyu, who were standing behind Taoist Xintian, watched this scene in shock. To be able to survive a full-powered attack from a cultivator at the transcending mortality stage, the shock that Gu Fei had brought them was a little hard to accept. As far as they were concerned, it was as easy as flipping one's hand for a cultivator at the transcending mortality stage to kill a cultivator at the awakening self stage. The miracle that appeared on Gu Fei had shattered this fixed view of theirs. Was the cultivation method of the Green Spirit Peak really so powerful? At this time, Li Lingfeng and Ziyu vaguely understood why the sect master valued this sole remaining disciple of the Green Spirit Peak so much. If such a heaven-defying disciple were to mature, what kind of scene would that be? This Gu Fei was still young, but his potential was limitless. Just who would attack Gu Fei? In the short period of time that the mysterious person had exchanged blows with Gu Fei, he had already used such a sinister move. Clearly, he was determined to kill Gu Fei. However, in front of a peerless expert at the 9th heavenly layer of the void-controlling realm, this little trick naturally could not be hidden from their eyes. Taoist Xintian did not directly use his great power to expel the Taoist true fire hidden in Gu Fei's body. Instead, he sent streams of power into Gu Fei's body to stimulate the medicinal power of the 9 Revolutions Golden Elixir, using Gu Fei's own power to expel the true fire in his body. At the 8 Revolutions Golden Elixir, the Taoist true fire in Gu Fei's body had been completely forced out. The terrifying heat scorched the ground around Gu Fei into scorched earth. The praying mat he was sitting on did not seem to be an ordinary item, for it could actually withstand the terrifying heat emitted by the Taoist true fire without being burned to ashes. Taoist Xuantian's great power formed streams of light outside of Gu Fei's body, completely binding the powerful spiritual power that erupted from the 9 Revolutions Golden Elixir within Gu Fei's body, not allowing a single strand of it to spill out. Li Lingfeng and Ziyu were both extremely envious. Gu Fei actually had such a fortuitous encounter that the sect leader would personally treat Gu Fei's injuries. The medicinal power of the 9 Revolutions Golden Elixir would definitely cause Gu Fei to be reborn. This time, Gu Fei had really profited from a disaster. The power in the secret chamber was vast and mighty, and the yuan qi emitted from Gu Fei's body also became more and more intense. His body, under the enormous spiritual power, rapidly recovered. The fist mark on his back gradually began to fade, and the blue veins also began to disappear on his back. And the barrier that Gu Fei's cultivation seemed to have made some breakthroughs under the effect of this spiritual power. The spiritual power transformed from the 9 Revolutions Golden Elixir was extremely pure, flawless, and full of vitality. It was precisely this power that caused Gu Fei's stagnant cultivation base to once again advance. Gu Fei's cultivation base was originally only a step away from the peak of the 7th heavenly layer. Now, he had finally taken this step. With his cultivation base at the peak of the 7th heavenly layer, even if he encountered an awakened 9th heavenly layer cultivator, he would still be able to put up a fight. On the path of cultivation, aside from unremitting effort, there was also a bit of opportunity. For example, if Gu Fei hadn't been attacked this time, if Taoist Xintian hadn't personally saved him, he wouldn't have been able to make a breakthrough under such circumstances. There was no doubt about the miraculous effects of the 9 Revolutions Golden Elixir. When the sky was about to brighten and the stars began to recede from the sky, Gu Fei finally completed the 9 Revolutions Golden Elixir and completely refined the spiritual power transformed from the 9 Revolutions Golden Elixir. The spiritual power merged with his own strength, and all his internal and external injuries were completely healed. The shocking fist mark on Gu Fei's back had long since disappeared. Just as he was refining the enormous spiritual power of the 9 Revolutions Golden Elixir, all the muscles and bones in Gu Fei's body immediately exploded, and a wave of air surged out from his body. Li Lingfeng and Ziyu, who were standing behind Taoist Xintian, suddenly felt a strong wind blow against their faces, and they were extremely shocked. Gu Fei's bronze-colored skin was shrouded in a layer of precious light, and there seemed to be streams of light swimming on his body. His iron body exuded a powerful and oppressive aura. The flesh and bones in his body had been cleansed by the enormous spiritual power of the 9 Revolutions Golden Elixir 9 times, making Gu Fei feel as if he had been reborn. His precious body had become even more powerful. The fluctuations of spiritual power in the secret room gradually subsided, and the fluctuations of yuan qi also gradually converged into Gu Fei's body. Gu Fei's eyelids moved, and then he opened his eyes. What was reflected in his eyes was the slight smile of Taoist Xintian, the head of the Taishan sect. Gu Fei hurriedly turned around and bowed to Taoist Xintian. Gu Fei greets the head of the sect. Many thanks to the head of the sect for saving my life. Although Gu Fei had been sent flying by a punch from the mysterious person before Taoist Xintian had arrived, and then he had been strangled by the Li Fire sword Qi on his neck, causing him to fall into a coma. The moment he woke up, he knew that it was Taoist Xintian who had saved him. Taoist Xintian stood up and said indifferently, "Get up." Then he said to Li Lingfeng and Ziyu, "Take Gu Fei to bathe and change his clothes, and then go directly to the square. It won't be long before the second round of the competition begins." "Yes, head of the sect." Li Lingfeng and Ziyu hurriedly responded in unison. Then, Gu Fei, Li Lingfeng, and Ziyu bowed to Taoist Xintian, and Gu Fei, led by Li Lingfeng and Ziyu, walked out of the secret room. There seems to be a secret on Gu Fei's body. The Tai Chi symbol on his chest is very similar to the one that appeared on the night when the demon lord of Six Paths attacked. Could there be some connection between the two? Taoist Xintian sat down cross-legged on the praying mat again and began to ponder. When he was healing Gu Fei, he had discovered the strangeness on Gu Fei's chest. This shocked him, and question marks appeared in his mind. Chapter 51. Taishan Peak was the most beautiful and magnificent of the 9 peaks of Taishan. The peak was covered with green trees, and exotic flowers and grasses could be seen everywhere. Waterfalls and springs dotted the landscape, and celestial clouds lingered. It was a scene of immortals. On this morning, when the sky was about to brighten and the eastern horizon was bright and bright, a man emerged from a small pool below a waterfall at the back of the mountain with a hualop sound. The man walked straight out of the pool, letting the water flow down his body. His bronze-colored body was slender and straight. His muscles were not very developed, but he gave off a feeling of power. It seemed that every muscle contained a terrible, explosive power. The perfect curves of his body could make all the girls in the world blush. He was this kind of person, a warrior who was cold, strong, and always maintained a heart of cultivation. He was Gu Fei. Gu Fei's appearance was not that breathtakingly handsome, nor did he have the charm that could make all the girls in the world fall head over heels for him. However, his face was well-defined, giving off a sense of determination and courage. He was a decisive person. Once he decided on something, he would not easily change his mind. For his enemies, he was a dangerous beast. No one knew what he would do in the next moment, because all his actions were in accordance with his heart. This was Gu Fei, the last disciple of the Green Spirit Peak of Taishan sect. Among the 3 great Taoist sects, he was the only one who did not cultivate Taoist magic. He was a different kind of Taoist disciple. Brother Gu. When Gu Fei came out of the pool, an ordinary-looking disciple in white came up to Gu Fei with a set of clean clothes and handed them to him. If other disciples saw this scene, they would definitely be shocked. Then, the gossip of Li Lingfeng helping Gu Fei bathe and dress would definitely spread throughout the Taishan sect in the shortest time possible. The ordinary-looking disciple in white who came forward with the clothes was the eldest disciple of the younger generation of the 9 branches of Taishan, Li Lingfeng. "Thank you, senior." Gu Fei took the clothes. At this time, the water stains on his body had already been evaporated into water vapor by his inner yuan qi and dissipated into the surrounding air. After seeing Gu Fei put on his clothes, Li Lingfeng smilingly said, "It seems that Junior Brother's cultivation has improved again. I remember that Junior Brother's previous cultivation level seemed to be, When Gu Fei heard this, he immediately felt a chill in his heart. Li Lingfeng's words had a hidden meaning. Gu Fei immediately became vigilant. Without batting an eyelid, he said, "On the path of cultivation, opportunities are sometimes very important. I, your junior brother, was just a little lucky." As for Li Lingfeng's curiosity about his sudden increase in cultivation, Gu Fei simply brushed it off without leaving a trace. Gu Fei did not want anyone else to know about the secret of his great increase in cultivation, because if this secret were to be leaked, it would bring him endless troubles in the future. Oh! Li Lingfeng looked at Gu Fei with a strange look in his eyes. He said with some envy, I don't have such luck as junior brother. Ha. Gu Fei laughed, then asked, Where is senior brother Ziyu? Why don't I see him? Gu Fei immediately changed the topic, not wanting to talk more about cultivation with Li Lingfeng. Junior brother Ziyu? He has already returned to his place of cultivation. Today's second round of competition is very important. He needs to prepare, said Li Lingfeng. After the first round of competition, out of the 81 outstanding disciples of the 9 branches who participated in the competition, 39 people were eliminated, and 42 people advanced to the second round of competition. These 42 young disciples of the Taishan sect, who won, represented the 42 young disciples with the most powerful cultivation level in the 9 branches of Taishan. No one was weak, and the weak had already been eliminated. Even a young expert like Ziyu did not dare to be careless. As disciples of the sect leader, the pressure they endured was much greater than the disciples of the other 8 branches. The disciples of the sect leader had to lead the group of disciples of the 9 branches. They were the role models for the disciples of the other 8 branches. Therefore, Li Lingfeng, Ziyu, and the others could not lose. Even if they lost, they had to lose brilliantly. I want to cultivate my qi here for a while. I wonder if it's possible? Gu Fei's cultivation had broken through to the peak of the 7th level of awakening. He wanted to feel out the situation in his body in order to better control the new power in his body. When Li Lingfeng heard this, his face did not show any expression. He only glanced around, then said, Why not? However, you must not miss today's competition. In that case, thank you, senior brother. When the competition begins, I will definitely be there on time. As Gu Fei spoke, he walked to a large rock beside the pool, jumped up, and then sat cross-legged on the rock, closing his eyes to cultivate. When Li Lingfeng saw this, he shook his head and left this beautiful place to go to the Supreme Mystery Temple. In the rear hall of the Supreme Mystery Temple, where Taoist Xintian cultivated, Taoist Xintian sat quietly on a praying mat like a stone statue. There were no fluctuations coming from his body, as if he had really turned into a lifeless stone statue. No one could sense his existence. Taoist Xintian seemed to have become one with the world. His Tao was profound, and he was one with the world. His spiritual power was endless. This was the terror of a cultivator at the 9th level of Imperial Void. He was only a step away from attaining the position of a half-god and enjoying an immortal lifespan. This was the immortal god realm that every single cultivator that comprehended the grand Tao and pursued immortality dreamt of. Unfortunately, this one step separated immortals from mortals. It was this one step that had shackled Taoist Xintian for hundreds of years. The demigod realm was like an unattainable fruit. He could only smell the fragrance of the fruit, but he could not pluck it. Longevity grass, 200 years of lifespan. I can't miss this chance. Suddenly, Taoist Xintian opened his eyes, and a bright light flashed through them. At this time, a series of light footsteps came from the distance and stopped outside the door. Come in. With Taoist Xuantian's powerful divine sense, the scene outside the door was immediately reflected in his mind. It was even clearer than when he saw it with his eyes. The stone door was pushed open from the outside, and a white-robed youth walked in. The white-robed youth closed the stone door and respectfully walked in front of Taoist Xintian. Did you send off that Gu Fei? Taoist Xintian asked indifferently. He didn't even look at the ordinary-looking youth in front of him. This youth was Li Lingfeng, who had come back to report. He quickly said, Ancestor, junior brother Gu Fei is still in the back mountain, preparing for today's competition. Oh? Taoist Xintian was a bit surprised. The people of Green Spirit Peak were all cultivation maniacs. This was not bad. They didn't miss any time to cultivate. Very good. Taoist Xintian nodded to himself. You can leave. Taoist Xintian said. Yes. Li Lingfeng respectfully took a few steps back, then turned to the stone door, opened it, and walked out. The cultivation place of the ancestor was not a place that just anyone could enter. Without Taoist Xuantian's orders, No one in the Taishan sect dared to come here, not even the heads of the 7 branches. What secrets does Green Spirit Peak have that I don't know? Is the Tai Chi symbol on Gu Fei's chest a coincidence, or? Taoist Xintian slowly closed his eyes and turned back into a statue. He sat quietly on the praying mat, motionless and silent. The sun rose from the east, dispelling the darkness that shrouded the world. Light shone on the earth. A figure stood at the top of Shaoyang Peak, facing the rising sun. His stomach expanded and contracted, and 2 flickering flames came out of his nostrils. The power of fire in the world, especially the first wisp of true fire that came from the rising sun, was sucked into the nose of the old Taoist. This old Taoist was the head of the Shaoyang Peak, Taoist Chaoyang. Taoist Chaoyang cultivated in fire elemental Tao techniques. He was absorbing the true fire of the sun to nourish the fire elemental power in his body. With the 9 revolutions of qi, Taoist Chaoyang's nostrils sucked in the 2 streams of crimson qi into his body. His entire body was immediately covered with a layer of faint fire, emitting a terrifyingly high temperature, causing the space around him to distort. Where Taoist Chaoyang stood, there was not a single blade of grass within 100 feet of him. All that was left was a scorched and cracked stone. It seemed that he often absorbed the sun's fire here, so much so that the ground within 100 feet around him was scorched. After finishing his cultivation, Taoist Chaoyang's figure suddenly disappeared from the top of the mountain. Not only the old Taoist on Shaoyang Peak, but all the disciples of Taishan sect who cultivated in fire elemental Tao techniques were standing high up, facing the sun, breathing in and out. They were all doing the same thing, and that was to absorb the first wisp of pure sunlight that shone into the world when the sun rose. When the sun rose in the morning, the first ray of sunlight was the first wisp of sun essence that the sun emitted throughout the day. It was the purest true fire of the sun. Then, the sun emitted a dazzling light that illuminated the world. The pure true fire of the sun gradually faded until it finally disappeared. Clang! Soon, a melodious bell sound rang throughout the 9 peaks of Taishan. It came from Taishan Peak, which was surrounded by the 8 peaks. It echoed throughout Taishan Mountain for a long time. This sound seemed to penetrate through Taishan Mountain and spread to every corner of the huge Taishan Mountain for hundreds of miles. It completely broke the peace of Taishan Mountain. After the bell rang, on the other 8 peaks that surrounded Taishan Peak, white-robed disciples or green-robed disciples appeared one after another. The disciples of Taishan sect who were cultivating on the 9 peaks of Taishan all came out from their cultivation places. Whether they wanted to or not, when they heard the bell, they all had to go to Taishan Peak in the middle. Even those who were in a deep state of meditation were awakened by the sound of the bell without exception. The disciples of the 9 branches gathered outside Taishan Temple on Taishan Peak. The 9 major arenas stood on the square, and the heads of the 7 branches and Xintian Taoist sat high up in front of the temple. Chapter 52. The second round of competition was much more intense than the first round yesterday. 42 disciples were able to win in yesterday's competition, so they must have had something special about them. Either they were better at Taoist techniques, or they had powerful magical treasures that made it difficult for them to fight. But no matter if they won with Taoist techniques or magical treasures, no one had any objections. Victory was victory, defeat was defeat. This was the cruel rule of the strong. After the lots were drawn, the second round of competition began under the direction of the Xuanfa Taoist. The 9 arenas in the square were immediately filled with excitement. All kinds of Tao techniques emerged one after another, and the powerful pressure that emanated from the magical treasures was frightening. On the 9 arenas, 42 of the most outstanding youths from the 9 branches showed off their skills and fought with all their might. Even if they did not go too far, it was inevitable that one side would be injured. But if it was not life-threatening, or if the opponent was deliberately injured, the sect would not pursue the matter. The heads of the 7 branches and the sect leaders sat in front of the Supreme Mystery Hall. No one dared to act presumptuously in front of them. Therefore, the 9 Peaks trials were carried out in an orderly manner without any disputes. It seemed that not many people knew that Gu Fei had been attacked last night, nor did it spread within the sect. Perhaps the sect leader and the heads of the 7 branches had suppressed the matter. The 9 Peaks trials continued as usual, as if nothing had happened. This surprised Gu Fei. The reaction of the sect leader and the heads of the 7 branches seemed to be a bit unusual. The Taishan sect was one of the 3 main sects, a famous sect in the world of cultivators. To have a disciple attacked in the sect was no small matter, but the sect did not seem to have done anything about it. Whatever happens, it is not something I can control. Let's win the 9 Peaks trials first. At this moment, the outcome of the battle between the 2 youths on the first ring had been decided, and it was Gu Fei's turn to enter the ring. Lei Ao, an outstanding disciple of the Biyun Peak, seems to be Dongfang Qin's senior brother. Interesting. Gu Fei stepped onto the stage and was greeted by a tall youth with long arms and legs. He looked very mighty. The 2 walked to a distance of 6 feet from each other and stood still. Lei Ao had the head of a leopard, the eyes of a tiger, the waist of a bear, and the appearance of a mighty man. It could be said that he was naturally gifted. Lei Ao stood in front of Gu Fei, and a ferocious beast-like aura immediately swept towards Gu Fei. Gu Fei's pupils involuntarily shrank. This Lei Ao is not simple. Gu Fei felt that Biyun Peak's Lei Ao's cultivation was not inferior to Dongfang Qin's. He was a strong opponent. Humph. Gu Fei, you went too far yesterday. Today, I will return the humiliation that Dongfang Qin suffered to you. Lei Ao pointed at Gu Fei with an ominous glint in his eyes and said ruthlessly, Senior brother Lei, why are you still talking so much with this arrogant guy? Just beat him up and help us vent our anger. The Biyun Peak disciples below the stage all clamored. Not a single one of them did not glare at Gu Fei angrily. It seemed like they were going to attack Gu Fei as a group. Yesterday, on the arena, Gu Fei's humiliation of Dongfang Qin had greatly angered all the disciples of the Biyun Peak and made them lose face. It would be strange if these disciples were not angry. As for Dongfang Qin, below the arena, he was gnashing his teeth at Gu Fei. He could not wait to jump onto the arena and chop Gu Fei into pieces to vent his anger. Yesterday, Gu Fei made him lose face in front of the disciples of the 9 factions. It could be said that he had formed an irreconcilable grudge with Gu Fei. Although Dongfang Qin had suffered serious internal injuries yesterday, after a night of treatment by the experts of the sect and the consumption of elixirs, his injuries seemed to have completely healed. The methods of cultivators were extremely mysterious. For those with great power, even moving mountains and draining seas was a piece of cake. It was very easy to heal a mere internal injury. Last night, Gu Fei was attacked by a cultivator of the transcending mortality stage. His body was hit by the Taoist true fire, which burned his meridians and meridians. His injuries were unimaginably serious, but he was still healed by Taoist Xuantian's 9-revolution golden pill. What a joke. Even Dongfang Qin is not my opponent. You should just admit defeat. Gu Fei said disdainfully. Lei Ao's cultivation seemed to be on par with Dongfang Qin's, but he still wanted to help Dongfang Qin vent his anger. Wasn't he looking for trouble? Damn it. Today, I will let you experience my power. Lei Ao was instantly enraged when he heard Sumo's words. Veins appeared on his forehead. Then prepare to be tortured. Gu Fei's expression turned cold and a ray of light shot out from his eyes. Then, he left an afterimage on his original spot and appeared in front of Lei Ao in an instant. Lei Ao did not expect Gu Fei's speed to be so fast, and he was instantly shocked. However, he was, after all, a rare young expert among the young disciples of Biyun Peak. When Gu Fei moved, he let out a low roar and a violent wave of spiritual power surged out of his body. There was a series of crackling sounds around his body and sparks flew everywhere. His body was actually covered with a layer of dazzling lightning that was as thick as a child's arm, protecting him inside. When Gu Fei approached Lei Ao with his extreme speed, he had already attacked. A fist had already landed on Lei Ao's abdomen, and the fist had even touched Lei Ao's clothes. However, Lei Ao's spiritual power had already erupted from his body like a volcano. It was a layer of red lightning net that carried a shocking fire elemental power. 5 Thunder's execution? Gu Fei's fist instantly collided with the protective lightning that surged out of Lei Ao's body and gave out a low, thunder-like sound. Then, Gu Fei quickly retreated. His entire arm was already covered with red lightning. It was that punch that caused Lei Ao's protective lightning to attack Gu Fei's arm. It caused his entire right arm to feel numb. What a powerful lightning power! It is many times more powerful than the palm thunder. When the red lightning attacked his arm, Gu Fei's right sleeve was immediately burnt into ashes. Roar! With an angry roar, Gu Fei shook his right arm and used a strong force to disperse the red lightning on his arm. Then, he stopped his retreating body and stared coldly at Lei Ao, who was still retreating. Gu Fei's fist was extremely powerful. Although the fist did not really hit Lei Ao's body, the strong force of the fist still caused Lei Ao to suffer a great impact. His body was unsteady as he retreated continuously. Every time he took a step back, Lei Ao's heavy and ferocious steps caused the arena beneath his feet to tremble. He retreated continuously for more than 10 steps before he could dissolve the force of Gu Fei's fist. Warriors are indeed scary. Every move they make is filled with great force. In terms of body strength, I am not as good as Gu Fei. Lei Ao was secretly shocked. With a lightning-fast exchange of blows, he had already determined how strong Gu Fei was. 5 Thunders Technique. Eastern would thunder appear. Lei Ao pinched a thunder seal with both of his hands. The red lightning on his body that was crackling continuously immediately turned into a dark green color. Then, it rushed out from Lei Ao's body and formed more than 10 green lightning arcs that struck towards Gu Fei. The strong force of the thunder contained a wave of plant essence qi. The wood elemental power in the air also gathered from all directions and merged with the lightning, causing the tins of green lightning arcs to explode with even more blinding light. Among all the Taoist skills, the most powerful one was the thunder skill. Thunder was the command of heaven, and it represented heaven to punish. Once the thunder was out, everything in the world would tremble. And the thunder skill that Lei Ao cultivated was the authentic 5 Thunders technique. Even though the thunder had not formed a core of Tao and had broken through to the realm of transcending mortality, the power of the thunder that he displayed was not to be underestimated. Feeling the oppressive aura that was filled with destruction from Lei Ao, Gu Fei could not help but frown. But at this moment, the tins of green lightning arcs had already struck in front of him, and he did not dare to be careless. His right hand grabbed the air in front of him, and a purple light instantly rushed out from his palm. With a clang sound, a purple lightning that looked like a sword but was not a sword immediately condensed and was caught in his hand. Gu Fei waved the 3 feet purple lightning that looked like a sword but was not a sword. Instantly, there was a chi-chi sound. Rays of purple sword chi broke through the air and slashed towards the tins of green lightning arcs at lightning speed. There was a series of loud noises as the sword chi and lightning collided with each other. But Gu Fei's body followed the sword and his aura was imposing. When he destroyed the lightning arcs, he took big steps towards Lei Ao. Gu Fei used the desolate steps. It looked slow, but it was actually very fast. Lei Ao saw Gu Fei turning into a flowing shadow and pouncing towards him, and he was instantly shocked. Although he was tall and strong and his Taoist techniques were powerful, his martial arts were very ordinary. He did not dare to let a martial artist like Gu Fei get close to him. Lightning doppelganger. Lei Ao shouted, and there was a loud sound of thunder in the arena. At the same time, his body suddenly became blurry. Gu Fei's heavy punch directly penetrated through Lei Ao's chest. Just when everyone was shocked, Lei Ao's figure had already appeared behind Gu Fei. Illusion? Gu Fei's face was expressionless as he dispersed Lei Ao's afterimage doppelganger with one punch. He was not surprised at all. Lei Ao's doppelganger technique was much inferior to the doppelganger technique that the person from last night had used. 5 Thunders Execution, South Fire Thunder Appear, Central Earth Thunder Rise. Lei Ao's hands instantly formed 2 Taoist seals. On the arena, there was instantly an explosion of 2 violent forces. Then, kaboom! A large ball of fire exploded in the air above Gu Fei's head. It shot out streaks of lightning that were like fire snakes and formed a fire net that covered Gu Fei's head. At the same time, a thick earth energy suddenly rose under Gu Fei's feet. The earth energy was not a patch of grayness. Instead, under Lei Ao's Taoist technique, it had condensed into streaks of grayish lightning, which coiled around Gu Fei's body with crackling sounds. Five Thunder's execution used the power of the five elements to condense the power of lightning and used it to attack the enemy. The violent power of lightning tore the air apart and attacked from above and below. It completely sealed all of Gu Fei's escape routes.